Hey, what's going on, everybody? Hi, welcome to the show. It's podcast time to talk about the latest news and reviews and whatever from the world of video games. I'm your host for this week's installment of the Jeff Gerstmann Show. My name is Jeff Gerstmann. Hello. We're here at the end of August, just about September. Games are starting to come out. People are, it wouldn't be a late September if there wasn't one game coming out that people were like, why didn't some outlets get it? And here we are. So yeah, it's been a little bit of an eventful morning here. My daughter recently just turned 4 and had to go get her shots at 4. So she went out this morning. That's why we're getting started a little bit late this morning. If you are joining us live here on Twitch. She got her shots. She was very excited to show me the spot on where the shot. She came back. She was like, I got a shot. She was all excited about it because she's seen television shows of doctors, like all the other stuff. Giving shots. She's got her little doctor kit. She gives me fake shots all the time and everything else. So she's ready for it. She said she couldn't even feel it. She didn't even flinch. So that's great. Hopefully my son has been basically the same way so far, but I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy. We bought a minivan over the weekend. I was not expecting to buy a minivan, but it is hard to find cars. I don't know if you have done any shopping for any big stuff over the course of the pandemic and all the supply chain, everything, but it's been the shits out there for a good long time, and it still is for cars, apparently. It's like you can find a PlayStation 5 in stores now, but cars are still messed up for a variety of reasons. So we got a call. Man, I hate the pushy dealer stuff. I called around the dealerships in the area. Because their website would say like, we have one of those, but like when they say we have one of those, sometimes they still mean, oh, it's still being manufactured and we'll have it in 30 to 60 days. But yeah, if you want to buy one, we'll take your money for that right now. And so that's what some people are doing. They're buying cars that aren't even built yet. And so it becomes this weird situation where you're like having to buy cars sight unseen. It becomes hard to test drive cars because they're being sold before you can get it. So I got a call on Friday night from a dealership in the area, which was the pushiest one. I called that dealership and just said, do you have these cars? And they said no. And then I said, cool, man, I'm just, and they said, I can call you when we get them. I said, no, that's fine. I'm in and out of the area. I'm not, I'm kind of like, whatever. And then like 5 minutes later, I get a text message from the dealership saying like, we want to send you texts. I'm like, get fucked, you motherfucker. But, holy shit. What? And so that sucked. I get a call from a dealership on Friday night. And they're like, hey, we got 2 of these fucking vans. Do you want to see one? I said, yeah, I do. But I can't get down, I was like, yeah. And they're like, when can I get you in here? I'm like, fucking motherfucker. I got to talk to people. I got to schedule. I got to see who can watch the kids when. Like, I will try to get down there and fucking see it. So Sunday morning we went down and took a look at it. They had 2 of them. They had already sold one by Sunday morning. And got in there, looked at it. I was worried about, so like I wanted like a higher trim package or whatever, because like it's a Toyota Sienna and they come in like 6 different variants, right? And so one of them's like, this one has the cameras, and I'm like, well, it's a van. My wife uses the camera on the car that we have, and it needs to have a backup camera. It needs to have this. It needs to, a few different things. And the version that they had was not the version I was looking for, but I went in going like, we'll test drive it and then try to find one of these cars. It looked like there was another dealer in the area that might get one sometime in October, which our baby is due early October. So you need a We can't fit 3 car seats in the car that we have. So we're gonna need a bigger car as soon as we can get one. So we went and test drove it. And I was like, oh, actually, this has all the stuff that I wanted on the higher model. It just as option packages or whatever. It had a subwoofer, like the important shit. No, it had a pretty good backup camera. It had all, like basically all of the stuff I was looking to get on it anyway. And it was $10,000 less than the version that I thought we were going to need. And so I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And so we did not go in expecting to buy a car and then bought a car. And they mark up cars now. they mark up cars. Did it have chrome wheels? Yes, it does. I hate the chrome wheels. I actually think the chrome wheels kind of look like shit. Some nice alloy wheels would look a little better. We get some Enkies on there or something. Something nice. No, I don't know. Yeah, so we ended up getting it, and because I was right there, and I don't like to negotiate. I don't like to negotiate for shit. It's a pain in the ass. It's annoying. But like, it was very much like this guy who had a name or a nickname that, like, he sounded like a video game boss. It was like I was buying a car from Vulcan Raven or something. Which was like even more. I was just like, yeah, I will happily buy a car from this guy. He was nice. And he was like, he's literally like, what will it take? How much money do I need to take off for you to? And I'm like, yeah, no, if you, I see this dealer markup here where you are just arbitrarily charging more money for the car because you can. Why don't we take that off? And he went and checked with his manager and came back and said, okay. And I said, all right, I will write you a check right now for the price of this car. And so we bought a car, and so that was nice. I don't know. Haven't driven it yet. They delivered it. It was fuck, man. So my wife and I managed to go looking for cars, going to try to test drive cars, both of us with expired IDs. Hers, she just had the old ID and had her current ID was in another purse. Mine expired on my birthday and I didn't even fucking realize it. So I'm like, oh shit. So we're both sitting there signing paperwork to purchase a car that they're not going to let, they're like, yeah, we're gonna need to get a picture of ID. So we had, my wife's mother was here with the kids. So she took a picture of the right ID and sent it to them, and they whatever. But they still needed to, when you buy a car, especially, we did it in a hurry. We were like, we're trying to get the fuck out of here, which, between us having IDs and checks and all this other stuff with like 9 different addresses on it, because there's just like accounts and stuff I haven't moved since we moved down here. And us having expired IDs and try to get out of there quickly. I'm surprised they just go like, you guys are criminals, huh? You guys are criming. I'm like, oh, you got us. We're criming. Anyway, they sold us the car, and then they had to clean it up and do all this other stuff. So it takes time to, when you buy a car, they're like, we're going to put gas in it and we're going to wash it. I'm like, yeah, that's okay. Yes. And they're like, and that's going to take 5 hours. And so every other time I've been involved, been with someone who was buying a car, or, the last time I leased a car, it was hours and hours and hours, of sitting there going, fuck. They made it real fast, and then and then we just left, and they delivered the car later in the afternoon, which ended up solving the dumb problem of, not having valid IDs. I came home, I renewed my ID online, and I have a piece of paper that says that I have a valid ID, and they'll mail me one, I guess. So no, I can't buy. No, if you're out there trying to get me to buy beer for you, I'm sorry, I cannot. I have a temporary ID, so I cannot buy alcohol for you. Anyway, so it's been sitting in our driveway, and we haven't driven it anywhere because I also need to call the insurance company and get it insured, because I haven't had time to do that. So all the fun of buying a van, but we don't actually need the van until October, because that's when the kid is coming. And so we need to, we got to move the car seats over and decide when we're going to do that and all this other stuff. So I get my old car back. instead of driving my wife's car that she drove in college, which is not an amazing car, especially after putting $1,000 into it to fix the alternator and all the anyway. So that, that was a weird weekend. I don't know. But also there were video games. I feel like a transition music would be good. There were video games. Let's see. Which one of these can I talk? Immortals of Aveum. We ended up streaming some of that on PC last week. I ended up playing some more of it. This is an interesting game because there's a really good Eurogamer article kind of breaking it down because they talked to like the head of technology at the studio, because it is kind of the first, I guess, Unreal Engine 5.1.1 game, I think is what that article said. But it is kind of cutting edge on engine technology in terms of all the stuff it's using. That doesn't make it a great video game, it turns out. And also, I don't know that I would say that it looks great. There are aspects of it that I think look very good. Yeah, it is a first-person shooter with magic. You are kind of alternating between red magic, which is more shotgunny at the start, and blue magic, which is more of a kind of standard shot, and green magic, which is more of a chain gun kind of. Anyway, we talked a little bit about it last week, and but at that point I had only played the PlayStation 5 version, which I found to be pretty framey at the outset and not great. It looked funky. And the PC version, I think, also looks funky. It's got like if you turn it all the way up, it has numbers in place that'll try to say like, hey, if you exceed your CPU can handle this number and your GPU can handle this number. And if you exceed this, then fucking I don't know. And I played around with the settings a bunch, trying to get it under those numbers and leaving it over those numbers. And at no point did it seem like it was running great. One of the fun things about G-Sync, one of the fun things about variable refresh rate monitors and FreeSync and so on and so forth is that it's really good at masking fluctuating frame rates. And that's awesome. That is when I got my first G-Sync monitor, I was pretty fucking blown away. Just in terms of like, it smooths out the experience so much. Like it's kind of smoke and mirrors in a weird way, but it's absolutely awesome. If you haven't seen it, or like going from a 60 hertz monitor to the first one I got was 144 and variable refresh, and being able to kind of just play around in that frame range, and all of it looks like pretty fucking smooth. Even though if you pull the number up and you do frame counting and pull and actually look at the frame rate, it's all over the place in a lot of games. You're playing like modern games and they're everywhere. It's like Call of Duty will be like, sometimes it's going down into the 50s, but a lot of times it's up around 130. And normally those sorts of fluctuations on a regular monitor that was not variable refresh rate would be tearing and it would be all fucked up. So G-Sync, and again, a lot of people have seen this. I'm not, this is, but a lot of people have not. And if you haven't seen that, it is probably the most meaningful like PC upgrade I think I've come across over the last 10 years. I think it's more interesting and more important than ray tracing has been to date. That'll eventually probably bear out the other way, but it's really nice. But when games stutter. So Immortals of Aveum, and even if I get the CPU number below the recommended rate or whatever, I still found it to be a pretty stuttery game. Not in the Unreal like shader caching sort of way. It caches its shaders up front, I think, and you're not really seeing that sort of hitchiness, but the game will just kind of seize up kind of all over the place, or at least that's how it's been for me. And G-Sync can only do so much when it comes to stuff like that, and in fact it cannot address stuff like that. So it's a very jumpy game, and I think that that really gets in the way. You know, there are aspects of it that you look at and go like, these are really nice, some particle effects in some spots, and these facial textures look nice, and like there's bits and pieces of art that look really nice, and some scenes that have a lot going on in them. They're like, oh, this is actually kind of cool in fits and starts, but it gets into fits and starts. And so I don't know if this ends up being an optimization thing, or because they are relatively cutting edge here on the engine, on the Unreal Engine stuff. If they're kind of out there on their own in a lot of ways, where they're just like, we're the first game to ship with all these bells and whistles turned on, and well, I don't know. The article, again, I think that was a Eurogamer article. It would make sense for it to be talking to some of the people behind that technology and some of the stuff that they did to get there. It really makes it sound like they were, like there were some cases where they were like, oh yeah, well, this version of the engine had this technology in place, but if you actually went and looked at it, Epic had notes in the code there that said do not use. And so in the next version, that stuff was all turned on, and so it sounds like that they are really out there on the edge, and that's kind of cool that they're out there kind of making it happen. I just don't think the game is, like, even when the game is running smoothly and all that other stuff, I don't think that combat is very exciting. I don't think the tool set is very good. It's a game that, it feels like they were like, oh, we need to have loot, we need to have this, we need to have a skill tree, we need to have, and so very little. I don't know, the game, none of that has made the game better. The writing is kind of crummy. The character dialogue and stuff is really light and flip in a way that I think is it's not the trend right now, I guess I would say, as much as that has very much been the trend across mainstream movies and everything for the last, I think that people are starting to get really sick of that stuff. And it is very full of like that type of like, I'm a streetwise youth and I'm cracking wise as we're going into battle. And you're like, yeah, there's room for that. But I don't think they do that very well. I think you could still do that well. I don't think they do that very well. So that's out on PC. I will be interested to kind of hear about how they have patched it once. I'm going to be very interested to see how that game develops over time, like as they spend more, if they spend more time optimizing or whatever the situation is. I can say optimizing, but I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck they need to do, but they need to do something because it doesn't run great. So we will see, how that goes. Also out, I think this is out today. Yeah. Or I guess maybe this came out like last night. The Making of Karateka, which is Digital Eclipse's like kind of, it's part of their Gold Master series, the first entry in their Gold Master series. This is a really impressive package. If you saw Atari 50 and saw what they did with this batch of Atari games, as well as like all these interviews with people at Atari and kind of wove all of that together into a cohesive package that feels like a playable documentary. The Making of Karateka is them doing that for a single game. And I think they picked a perfect game to do for this, because Karateka is an amazing video game that, it's like it doesn't get talked about all that much anymore, but is this amazing like early 80s cinematic like karate fighting game experience. Like it's a killer thing. I streamed some of it relatively recently. If you go back into but we will look at the new version as well in the days ahead. It's astounding. So it's like a full-on documentary about Karateka and some of the circumstances and other games around it that Jordan Mechner had made, including like some space shooters, some kind of some asteroids clones and so on. But then you also have interviews with Mechner and his father, who did the music for the game. But also it's a lot of stuff of like his father going like, oh yeah, every time you loved that damn asteroids. And so it's like, then he went on and made an asteroids clone that never got published. And so you get to see all of that stuff. There's some interviews around the industry impact on it and whatever else, and that stuff's good too. But like hearing Jordan Mechner and his father talk about the game is it's really cool. There are emulated versions of kind of the core versions of that game, like the Apple II version, the Commodore 64 version, the Atari 8-bit version, as well as some pre-release, like the different betas along the way that Mechner had held on to. So you can see early versions of an Apple II game, which you don't get to see every day, and that's pretty awesome. They also remade Karateka and made a new version of it at Digital Eclipse. And this is sort of like, they did this on Atari 50. They did some kind of like, here are some updated versions of some of these games, and they were neat. But this is so many people there are bad ports of Karateka out there. We played the NES version not that long ago, and it sucks. There are some pretty low rent versions of that game out there. And Digital Eclipse, Mike Micah and team, I suppose, remade a new version of it that is amazing. It plays how you want that game to play in terms of capturing the feel of the original game. While also, you can go back to when I streamed a bunch of Karateka, we played like 5 or 6 different versions of it, and we played the version that came to Xbox Live Arcade. It came out on the Xbox 360 and is on Steam right now, and that game is fucking terrible. And Jordan Mechner worked on that. It's bad. It's bad. It's a terrible video game, that thing. But this new like remaster remake of Karateka is perfect. Also, it incorporates some of the ideas that Mechner had that couldn't make their way into the original game. So there's like more. It is in a lot of ways this weirdly fully realized version of the game. But most importantly, it plays well, and it plays like the original games, but also a little bit snappier. The controls a little bit tighter in a slightly more modern way. That it is so worth checking out. There's commentary in that version too, so you can hear. We've had Mike Micah on the program before. He is doing the commentary, so like as you're walking forward, you'll hit these commentary points, and it will stop, and you will hear him talk about like, hey, here's what we wanted to do for this part of the game, or hey, this is why. And it's interesting because he describes it as like, I wanted to remake Karateka because I wanted to figure out why remaking Karateka is so hard, because there were these other kind of bad ports out there. Like what is it about this game that makes it so hard to do again? And they struck the right balance in making it feel like that Apple II game, updating the look of the game, but not too much, like maintaining that kind of rotoscoped, like smooth animation look, but also making it run at something faster than, I don't know, was it 15 frames a second, whatever the original game was. And maintaining the look and feel of that original game while kind of bringing it forward and giving it kind of weird little in-game goals. Like it's got a combo counter and some other kind of cool shit in there too. To me, that's, this thing's like $20, and to me the inclusion, like the remastered Karateka, is so fucking good that if it was just that for $20, I would feel like, all right, cool. That's maybe a little pricey, but all right. But like then to have the documentary, there's a remastered version of like another game that he did that I don't know that it ever got published. I think it's called, I believe it's called Death Bounce. It's like a space shooter involving a space train. And it's a pretty neat game as well. And so you can go in there and play like Death Bounce Rebounded. You can play a newly remade version of Death Bounce, which is this weird old space shooter. And that's like kind of cool as well in terms of an updated version of a space shooter. So you get that, you get these kind of prototype versions of the game, and you get all the interviews and kind of documentary style presentation. You get like a look at like, hey, at one point Broderbund was thinking about making a sequel to Karateka, and they kind of started going down the road of like, here's what we think this might look like. Here's what, as Mechner was coming up with like ideas for, scoping out like what his next game might be. And you see little bits and pieces of these kind of games that never happened, Karateka 2 and some of the other experiments that he was doing and drawing out art wise. And at some point you start to see screenshots or mock-ups of a fake Karateka 2 that they were doing at the time, and you look at it and go like, oh, this is how Prince of Persia happened. Like you look at it and see like, oh yeah, okay, well these platforms are really starting to look like Prince of Persia style platforms. You're really starting, and so it kind of leaves off there. And it's interesting. But yeah, you can play the original versions of the game. You can play these, the betas of the Apple II version that are, only have one level and, aren't balanced and all this other interesting stuff. It is a fascinating collection of material about a game. And I hope that I hope that Digital Eclipse does more of this. I'm trying to think like what would be like another great game. Is the NES? No, someone in Soup Bones in chat asks if the NES version is in the package. It is not. That's stuff that like I think Pony Canyon or something, so a lot of these versions, a lot of those ports get licensed out to other studios, and so Mechner probably doesn't control the rights or whatever to that version of the game. And so that version is not in there. Go play yourself some good Karateka and then go play that NES version and you'll see. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what you would do. Like, yeah, the Karateka is, I think, a perfect game because I think you look at it and like, it's impressive for its era in ways that still stand out now. Like presentationally, the way it has little cutscenes and things that make it feel more cinematic than games of its era did. I think that stuff is really, really cool. But like, yeah, in terms of like, what would be another game? Like, it depends on what material is available, right? Because it's not just the interviews. It's not just the released games. It would be like, oh, okay, do you have good prototypes that we could include that would be like, is there good material? Is there good, do you have like the original design doc? Do you have this and that? Yeah, Remy says Tetris. That would be an interesting one. I feel like recently, though, a lot of the Tetris history has been really well mined, though. So I don't know. Like a lot of that story is kind of out there in a relatively recent fashion with the movies and what was it, like the BBC documentary and some of that other stuff. But yeah, Karateka is a good one. I'm thinking other games of that era. Like if I think if you were able to look at it as a full franchise and actually get the licenses to all of the other weird versions that came out in Japan and everything else, Lode Runner would be really fascinating. Or could be really fascinating. I don't know what material. Like that's the thing. Like you have to investigate. I'm sure they have to investigate and go like, do you have good screenshots of this? Do you have what do you have on this that is unreleased or of interest around the games? Documentation. Early sprite sheets or whatever. But yeah, I think that it's a really impressive collection. I think if you care about this kind of like documentary style thing, like the thing they did with Atari 50, I think it could be a little weird to hear like, oh, they did Atari 50 but for one game instead of like a dozen or however 50 games, whatever there is. But this is the right game, and there's enough stuff around it, and that remade version of the game is really well made. So I really recommend you give it a look if you're at all interested in that sort of stuff. Let's see. I played some Whisker Squadron Survivor, which is out now, and it's like they're kind of turning a Star Fox style rail shooter into a kind of into a ass game, like it's into a roguelite, I suppose. You are doing all the shooting yourself. It's not. I think they're trying to liken it to Vampire Survivors or some of those other games, but it's really more of just a straight up kind of roguelite treatment. But it's got a neat kind of, kind of anime style to it. But it is, you are doing barrel rolls, you are doing Star Fox type stuff, and, kind of going straight ahead and shooting things and leveling up, and as you level up, you are acquiring weapons and picking new perks and everything that those games sort of do. It is interesting. I found it to be a little one note. It is. I'm going to go look and see if this is early access or not, because I'm not really sure if they're going to continue to update this. It's $15, which is, yeah, it's listed as early access. So yeah, it probably needs some more going for it, but it's got a really cool look. But yeah, this is from the developers of Race the Sun, and also from the developers of the upcoming Whisker Squadron, which is like this, but more open world or more open movement, rather. So this almost feels like a kind of stop on the way to the real game of like, hey, we kind of knocked out this little survivor we wrote the word survivor after this to evoke a certain type of game. I just wanted to point out that that's available, and it's an interesting look, if nothing else. But I think it's a little flat, and hopefully over the course of early access, they kind of just get some better variety into that game. AEW Fight Forever, the wrestling video game, updated to include its battle royale mode, which they are calling Stadium Stampede, which is a match type they do in the actual on actual television. Boy, oh boy, where to begin? It's so weird. It's so weird. So for starters, it controls and plays completely differently from the main game, whereas the initial, the actual video game or whatever kind of is this half step in the direction of these old N64 games that are trying to capture the look and feel of that stuff to a certain extent. Like, this game is a third person behind the back perspective. You are tilting the right stick to move the camera. You have a jump button. You have like light attack, strong attack, and a grapple. You're picking up inventory like hockey sticks and helmets and fucking bombs and t-shirt cannons, and you are in this big stadium, and then you pick where you start. There are 6 different starting locations, and over time the circle closes and you get together and do battle royale stuff. You can ride a horse. You can do it's fucking weird, man. It's not terrible. It's weird. It has a very strange feel to it. It doesn't really feel like a wrestling game per se, though you are occasionally doing some wrestling moves. When someone runs out of health, you can run up to them as they're kind of staggering around and hit your finisher on them. As you're fighting, poker chips are flying out of guys, and you're picking those up to gain levels kind of in match, and that will give you like, oh, you have a better punch now. You have a stronger kick, or because you hit level 3 in game or whatever. When you pick up the t-shirt cannon, you can aim down sights with it and shoot. Like, it's and it has a very quirky thing going for it, where you go like, this is very odd. In terms of how it feels and so on, like the way a match proceeds and just the way it tries to interpret wrestling into it, is a very odd thing. I don't think it's good, but it's interesting. You can bring your custom characters into it, which is to say, the custom character stuff in that game is not great. And it has this weird, like, you have to go into the online, so it has, tabs. When you launch the game, it's like, you can go play your single player modes or whatever, and then you go to the online tab, and then it's like, click the right stick to go to Stadium Stampede mode, and you click that, and it's almost like it's like launching a different video game in the background, because then it comes up, and you can click the right stick to toggle back to the main game. It's fucking bizarre. I should look in the directory and see if it has 2 executables. It's like, I don't know what the fuck they're doing. And I don't think it's, I've only had a couple of, I've only played a few matches here because the matchmaking times are not short. I'm playing on PC, and if you go look at the Steam charts for this game, not a ton of people playing it. I played a couple matches. I've won one of them. I placed like 3rd. Like it's not too hard to do okay. At least in these early matches, and I well, whatever. I'm playing as people that are like level 20 in it somehow, and I'm like, all right, yeah. It doesn't seem to have crossplay. That was something that they had said pre-release that the game would have crossplay. To have a 30-player mode like this seems like something they're gonna need crossplay sooner rather than later. It's I'm trying to find the words for it. It does not feel balanced. It does not feel like, in terms of just like the options you have to get out of the way of someone's incoming strikes. If you're standing up and they're striking, you can strike some of the wind up on the weapons. It feels like you're like, oh, this hockey stick is almost worthless because of the big wind up on it, but you can put on a football helmet and run around, and and it's like, it's quirky, it's goofy, and you look at it and go like, I can't believe this came from a licensed organization that has a television show. But like sometimes their brand of wrestling can be like fun and goofy and everything. So it's like, it does have this ragtag weird feel to it that I'm like mildly into. But I don't think it's actually much fun to run up to a guy and strike him. I don't like the targeting, the getting up in someone's face, having someone run up and jump on you as you're doing that. Just the visibility. There's so many different things about it. You just go like, God, man, it just feels like stuff that they didn't think of, or stuff that like they just didn't have the experience in this style of game, or what, whatever the situation was. It feels quaint in a way. You're like, oh wow, this is like something that someone would have made, I don't know, 9 years ago when Battle Royale games first started or something. So it's got this like almost throwback to the broken days, which is maybe not a positive thing, especially in the context of AEW Fight Forever being a full-priced video game. This is not some free-to-play thing that you can go jump into and just play. So that's going to keep your player counts probably in check. And yeah, I don't know. It's a mess, but a mess that I think if you already own that game, you should go look at the Battle Royale mode inside of AEW Fight Forever. It is not good enough. I'm not going to sit here and say you need to buy that game, because I think that game has a ton of caveats already. If you have not purchased it already, then you probably have your reason. I would wait for it to go on sale, or like there's something to it. It can be fun. But this new mode, this Battle Royale mode they have added to it, is fucking bizarre. And all I can think of is like, gosh, how did this happen? This feels like something. It feels like underscope, like the complete package of the game now feels overscoped, whereas the Battle Royale mode feels horrifically underscoped in ways of just like, you already need more than this. You already need more going on than you have, because this is a little thin. As funny and as weird as it is that I can throw literal fucking like Mad Bomber bombs at Chris Jericho or whatever, it's not good. It's not good. That said, if you own the game, you should reinstall it and give it a look, because it is weird. And it's worth seeing for its just fucking absolute weirdness. I think this may also made me really start missing Rumbleverse all over again. Rumbleverse is not a wrestling game either. I guess like this, for as much as AEW Fight Forever is very much a wrestling game, this Battle Royale mode is like, it's got a whiff of wrestling. It does a little bit better than Rumbleverse, because you look at it and go like, that's Kenny Omega, as opposed to like, here's a large cartoon man with a cat head, and and so it kind of has that going for it, I guess. But Rumbleverse feels like the systems by which you play it, the gameplay, some call it, feels like it was designed as opposed to fallen into. It feels like people sat down and said, no, we really need to balance this. You need to be able to counter this with this. If someone does this, there needs to be something you can do to stop that. And we need to create this guessing game. We need to create this rock, paper, scissors. Like they approached it like they approached a fighting game. Which is pretty much what they did. And it feels cohesive and it makes sense. AEW Fight Forever's Stadium Stampede mode does not feel cohesive and barely makes sense. And it has like a bunch of different upgrade trees. Like you build a loadout for it and you can toggle, like you have 100 points to spend on your loadout, and most of the moves cost somewhere around 30. So you can take 3 of them. And one of them's like, get some health back. And one of them is, you can run faster. You can jump higher. And so you can toggle those and pop that for like a quick buff for, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever it is. And it just feels bizarre. Bizarre in a way that games kind of aren't anymore. And so for that, I have to say, if you have a chance to try out the AEW Stadium Stampede mode, you should. It's fucking weird. But again, I don't think it's good. And I wonder where it's going. Because, gosh, so many other parts of that game could use some attention. And the idea that, like, instead of like, hey, we put in some more characters and a bunch of created wrestler parts, and now you can share your created wrestlers online. Like, the things that game would actually benefit from at its core. But instead it's like, here's this whole other thing we made, and it's fucking not great, but you're not going to play anything quite like it. It's a fucking really weird take on Battle Royale. You get in there and have 5 matches and then never touch it again. It's fucking weird. Like, now that game feels officially like they bit off more than they could chew. Whereas before it felt like this is a little undercooked and just needs some more stuff and it's missing a lot of content. Now you're like, now it just has weird content. Now it's like they made bad choices. You're like, oh, you've got all this mini game collection stuff, and that stuff is actually, you know what? Some of the movement in the mini games are maybe a little bit more like the Stadium Stampede stuff of like the way you run around the ring to collect poker chips and all the other stupid shit. Like that's probably, I bet there's some shared stuff there. It's bizarre, is my point. A very weird thing. Give it a look if you have the means, and hurry, because again, I don't think the player counts are going to stay high enough for this to really last. And I say that as someone who I consider myself a fan of AEW and what they're doing on television. They had their big show at Wembley Arena, which I'm still working my way through. It was on while I was out buying a freaking car. And so I've seen up to the Stadium Stampede match that was in there, which was a ridiculous, beautiful shit show. I don't know. It's been a great show so far, and I've managed to dodge some spoilers for the rest of the show, but not all. So whatever. I'm probably gonna watch the rest of that tonight. That's my plan. And lastly, I have not played a ton of it. Armored Core 6 is out. Armored Core 6 feels like it went out of its way to say, hey man, this is not your kind of thing. Like it felt like from the get-go, it was like, hey dude, you don't belong here. It seems really awesome. I really like the way it looks. I really love the reflections on the ground, just the way that everything, and looking at screenshots and videos of the mechs that other people have made and everything. And then I fought that helicopter at the very beginning of the game, 6 or 7 times in a row before I finally beat it. And I was like, okay, like I don't I hate the camera in this game. The lock-on stuff of locking on to this helicopter, and then I have to jump up and kind of judge the range on the melee attack. There's just like there's bits and pieces of it that I just, I found myself finally starting to get better at it, and I beat that fight, and went on to do some other stuff after that, and I was like, this is like and Bryn is saying the helicopter is not representative. I don't know why they put that in there. Yeah, I think that helicopter fight really sucks. It's really like, it just, in terms of just, you lock onto it and you're under it, and so you're getting this awkward camera angle, and you can assault boost up to it and hit it, and it's just like, it's janky in a way that I'm just like, man, I fucking like the first few times I fought it, I was like, I went through the first 2 times fighting it, and I was like, oh, I'm getting it, I'm getting better, and then no. And then I was like, oh, the thing I thought I was learning is not actually the thing. And so I got the shit beat out of me like 5 times in a row. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, well, I probably have to get good at the melee stuff. And so I got better at the melee shit, and, overheating it or whatever, staggering it. Staggering a helicopter, it's a ridiculous sentence, but that's what you do in that early fight. And then it, it expands from there. I understand now why all of the talk I saw about the game prior to me playing it was people saying like, well, you've got to swap boost and assault boost. Boost should be on the left stick and assault boost should be circle. What the fuck are these people doing? I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. I absolutely get it. So yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna play some more of it when I have time. I am playing another video game right now that is taking a bit of priority. But I do want to maybe get back to it a little bit. And it's, yeah, I don't know. So far, I would say it seems interesting, and it seems interesting in a way that like I have not felt from any of the other Armored Core games, or Chrome Hounds, or any of the other games you fucking sickos are talking about all the time now. We had these people under our thumb. The Chrome Hounds sickos. They were beaten down. They were done. And now they're out it again. We've allowed them to crawl out from under their rocks and allowed them to talk about Chrome Hounds in public places. You sick fucks. I don't know. At least it's got full analog camera control and everything, and we're not still like trying to hit L1 and R1 to look up and down like all that other early PlayStation shit, man. Holy smokes. Those people were the true sickos playing it back then. I don't know. When it comes to mech games, I liked Mech Warrior 2 a whole lot. A whole lot. And I liked Mech Assault 1 and 2 on the Xbox. I love those games because they were fun, they were multiplayer, and they were light. One of the things that a lot of mech games, and Mech Warrior 2 definitely gets into this, but I think Mech Warrior 2 has a really good balance of, difficulty of options and whatever else, like heat management. And all of the kind of simulation style stuff that comes with a lot of mech games is where I kind of start to check out a little bit. And I used to play, not often because it was not available in my city, but, we talked about it on Game Boys to Men, the podcast that Glenn Rubenstein and I do on Patreon. You can get more details on that at patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann. We would go play Battletech. We would go to the Battletech Center and sit in big cockpits, and I would, bought the manual, because they teach you like, here, just point and shoot, but like there's a zillion buttons in that cockpit, and if you buy the manual at the merchandise booth, give me a t-shirt and a manual. The manual tells you all kinds of stuff like, if you flip this switch, you unlock torso twist. And that's going to be a lot more complicated because suddenly you're going to be moving in a direction that you're not facing anymore. But we've got these foot pedals down here that you can use to strafe and do all this. And so you could flip switches to toggle advanced control modes that would like, once you got even the least bit good at those, the fucking rubes coming in from the mall going like, what's the robot game? You were fucking crushing them because you could get around on them in ways that they simply could not, because by default, Battletech was locked to, you are facing the same way, you are shooting the same way, you are not twisting the torso in any way, shape, or form. And that's not what a mech does. It's not what a tank does. It's not what, like all of that. So once you unlock all of that shit, and they're good rockers with their big clunky switches, shit lights up, and you're like, fuck all these motherfuckers, come on. And then you are, paying $20 to crush kids and crush their hopes and dreams, which is what I enjoy. But yeah, I don't know. My love of that did not necessarily translate into a love of simulation style mech games in the years that followed. So I think by the time Mech Warrior 3 came out, I was a little kind of like, I just want to pull the trigger and shoot. I don't want to have to think about weapon groups and, like, let me just get a Mad Cat and toggle everything to, let me put everything on weapon group 1. And as soon as I pull this trigger, the mech overheats, but hopefully everything in front of me is too busy being dead to fucking care. And whatever else. But yeah, I don't know. Armored Core, I love the look of it. I love seeing some of the things that people have designed and some of the decals they've created for their, like, it's like that stuff seems really fun. And the little bits and pieces I've watched of the game, of the later parts of the game, really make me want to play it. We'll see. I don't know. It seems fucking awesome. Like, it's another one of those games that is like, man, there sure are a whole lot of fucking great video games coming out this year across a ton of different genres and themes, and I think that it's going to end up, it'll be interestingly divisive in ways, because I think, you have people that are still down in their Baldur's Gate hole and they ain't coming out anytime soon. You've got all the these Armored Core sickos are now out in the streets having a great time. Like, it's fucking neat. Like, that's in a lot of ways, that's the dream, like that we're at a point that a lot of these games that had either become, that had gone out of style for one reason or another, that this shit is coming back around. And I think we started to see this with a lot of games and styles and stuff out of Japan, and having, more popularity than maybe they would have. And just like, it feels like that there's a gaming audience that is ready for a wider variety of weirder shit. And I think that's great. Like, that is awesome for gaming. Not to talk about the power of game, not to be, not to go all Jeff Keighley on you here, but the power of gaming to reach so many different players with so many different types of games is really incredible. And we've seen so much of that this year. It's really impressive. Like, I've seen people start to say, like, is this the best year in gaming? And of course I go like, last time I checked, it wasn't 1998, motherfucker. But, I think that when you look at some of the stuff that came out and some of the games that people are enjoying and what's still left to come for the rest of the year, you can make an argument. I don't know that you win that argument compared to 1998. Someone was trying to say 2008 or 2007 or something was up there too. I forget. But to me, it was always 1998. I mean, we wrote a half hour of television about 1998, so and put it on G4 back in the day. But yeah, yes, you could certainly, and I don't want to have this argument right now, but Nurikip says 1998 is pivotal. 2023 is a very good year. And yeah, 1998, we are simmering, we are settling into polygonal gaming and 3D gaming and camera control and all of the stuff that comes with that, and that stuff is becoming more robust and more well thought out than it was in the years past. And of course, we're a couple years into the N64 in 1998. You know, the PC is coming a long way with, you know, hardware and graphics cards and so on and so forth. You know, RTSs are at maybe what you could call their peak there around 98. At least as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, you know, there's a lot of cases to be made for why 1998 is an amazing year. But I think that, yeah, when you see I guess, again, the breadth, the different types of games on display that we've already seen this year between, like, you know, it's easy to look at Tears of the Kingdom and go like, well, of course a Zelda sequel is going to be a big deal. It's a Zelda game. But, like, think about how fucking weird that game is. Like, it's fucking awesome. How, like, as in terms of, like, mechanics and things you can do, and, like, it's not just, hey man, you're back at it, Link's back at it, and he's got to get the Master Sword, and Ganon's a pig man, that motherfucker. Like, yes, it is a lot of that, but it is all of these crazy mechanics and all of these, like, insane ideas that work out way better than it seems like it should. And I think that's, again, I think it's easy to forget just how weird that thing is, compared to, you know, when you say, like, oh, of course a Zelda game's gonna be a big good game, but, like, it's the things that make that game stand out and things that make that game special are not the parts where, like, hey, it's Breath of the Wild but better or whatever. Like, it's not, they did way more with it than that. So I think it's just a fascinating year for video games across the board, because there's all of that, and then you still have, like, a lot of fucking games that came in hot, came in weird, came in broken, you know, like, there's just like, it's a very weird year for games. Yeah, Honey Bucket says Wanted Dead. I reinstalled. I forgot that Wanted Dead existed. I missed it completely when it came out for whatever reason, because it was very missable, I think is why. And then, like, a couple of weeks ago, I installed it, going like, I should look at Wanted Dead. I need to look at Wanted Dead before the year is out. And so I installed Wanted Dead. And then a bunch of other games that I had to play first came in, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to uninstall Wanted Dead because I don't have enough hard drive space for this. People shit all over that game when it came out, but, like, I'm looking at it going like, maybe there's something to this. I don't know. It seems interesting. But, like, it's Stephanie Houston, the actress, video game star. Like, she's in that, and then also, like, I remember it was brought to my attention all over again because the company that was publishing that game also put out an album with her. Like, they published her album and had Giorgio Moroder work on it. Like, it's like, wait, what the fuck? Like, it's just like, what is this company again? And so it was just a very strange thing. So that led me back to Wanted Dead. And there's tracks on that album that you listen to and go like, this is actually all right. It's fucking weird. I mean, hey, Moroder still got it. It's just a straight, like, it just this all this super weird under the radar shit. You're like, I don't understand how this happens, but cool. I don't know, and maybe I'll play that game one of these days. But I had to uninstall it again because I don't know if you noticed, but video games got big, and my God, what do I have in here? This is a dumb question. Is my D drive 1 terabyte or 2? It's 1 terabyte. My boot drive is 2 terabytes. The D drive I put all the other SSD I put all the games on is merely a terabyte. And so that don't go as far as it used to. Maybe I'll buy a 2 terabyte or some bigger hard drive for that thing, a faster one maybe. I don't know, one of these days. But until then, I've just been managing space and moving more stuff to the C drive lately because direct storage demands it. For a highly limited subset of games. I guess that's the other, we were talking about Immortals of Aveum earlier. I guess Immortals of Aveum, I guess Unreal Engine does kind of just support direct storage. So even though I don't think they were out there touting it as like a big direct storage game, They did say in that interview that I was referring to earlier that it would benefit from being on a direct storage supported drive. So I ended up moving it over there, and I don't know. I did not notice an immediate difference. Anyway, that's video games. They're over. That's it. They're done. Let's get into the news. Baldur's Gate 3 is coming to Xbox this year. This comes from a post to Twitter from Svev Vink, the CEO and founder of Larian, according to videogameschronicle.com. That they have found a way to get Baldur's Gate 3 out on Xbox this year. They were out there saying, hey, yeah, we're coming to PlayStation and the Xbox version. I don't know what we're going to do. It's definitely not coming out this year, specifically citing because they were not sure how they were going to get split screen working on an Xbox Series S. And so because feature parity and all of that stuff had been kind of the if not the policy, the path that a lot of games have been taking when it comes to dealing with the Series S and the Series X, he was like, yeah, man, I don't know how the fuck we're going to do it to get it out on the S. I don't know. So he posted, this is all, Gamescom just happened. So a lot of people were in the same place at the same time. And last week he wrote, super happy to confirm that after meeting Phil Spencer yesterday, we found a solution that allows us to bring Baldur's Gate 3 to Xbox players this year still, something we've been working towards for quite some time. All improvements will be there with split screen co-op on Series X. Series S will not feature split screen co-op, but will also include cross-save progression between Steam and Xbox Series. And so, yeah, the earlier in the month, this is again from videogameschronicle.com, the director of publishing had posted like, hey, it's unlikely that we'll get it out on Xbox this year because, Microsoft requires us to have feature parity across Series S and Series X. And Phil Spencer kind of said, no, that's not the thing. There was a Eurogamer interview. The quote here is, we're taking feedback from devs, including Larian. I met with them today to talk about it, and I'm confident we're going to find a good solution, and we're going to learn. I don't see a world where we drop S. I'm dropping S every day. If you're not, call your doctor. In terms of parity, I don't think you've heard from us or Larian that this was about parity. I think it's more that the community is talking about it. There are features that ship on X today that do not ship on S, even from our own games, like ray tracing that works on X. It's not on S in certain games. That's a weird... So yeah, obviously the Series X and Series S are going to have graphical differences, and from the get-go, that was the main difference they were talking about. Was like, hey, the Series S, you're going to get 1440p, you're going to get, you're probably not going to get ray tracing, you're probably, get fewer visual bells and whistles, but the games will be there. And that was always how they presented it. And now, so him out there trying to say, oh, I don't think you've heard us talk about parity, like as if that was not a policy. And if it was not a policy, then they've done a bad job at communicating that to developers, because I feel like it is not the first time I have heard developers talk about like, oh, we've got to get feature parity across both of the Xboxes, and we've got to find ways to cram this stuff into the Series S. Larian was just out there talking about it the most. So I look at this as, this is something we talked about a little bit earlier when we were talking about just kind of the nature of Xbox and the nature of Microsoft and the way people at Microsoft can sometimes just be. Is that and this, I don't know, this is kind of like, this is ancient information, but I don't really have, no one has really said that it's changed. But this is, like I've talked to people as recently as the Xbox One days about this stuff. About Microsoft's policies and the way they put them in place, and how just there's a certain type of rank and file mentality that, you know, some people at Microsoft will get, that they're just like, well, that's the policy. You have to meet the policy, even in cases where it's not great for the game or the publisher or whatever. And sometimes the policy that I'm referring to from the Xbox One days was one around, hey, if you're going to put stuff out on our platform later than you put it out on PlayStation, we want something more. We want an enhanced edition. We want a bonus character. We want an additional color. We want something. If you're just going to put out the same game here a year and a half later, that's shitty. And so those sorts of things, those, you know, conceptually, those sorts of things would take hold. Not that the Xbox One generation deserved that sort of attention, but those were, you know, as I understand it, those were the sorts of ideas that they kind of had in place. And of course, you know, that's business. You're going to say stuff like that. And so in that case, it took the developer of the game that I had heard about going and finally getting in front of Phil Spencer and saying, hey, this is holding us back. You like this policy is making it harder for developers to support your platform or make this happen or make this happen. And the thing that I've always heard is that if you can kind of crack that shell and get your way to the leadership team, whether that's Phil directly or, you know, I don't know, the people around him, that they are very reasonable people and that they hear that stuff and go, let's get this out of your way. And make sure that whether it's we're waiving this policy for you specifically or blah, 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 or we're changing the policy or whatever. And so you know, maybe it's the case that they had never talked publicly about the idea of feature parity across games, but my understanding is that was always kind of the case. And the example that Spencer is citing here about visual differences, like that's not what we're talking about, because that was that's the whole pitch for the Series S, right? Is like, you're not going to get ray tracing, it'll be 1440p, but the games will run, it'll be less expensive, and that's been popular for them as an option. And so this sounds to me like the exact same scenario playing out again of someone getting in, like this is a situation where there's so much buzz. Everyone's talking about Baldur's Gate 3. We can debate whether that's deserved or like whatever. It's a fucking beloved game. The people that are playing it fucking love it. I think when it comes out on consoles, it'll get exposed to a whole new class of player that are going to get their hands on it and be like, what the fuck am I doing? And not be up for how deep that game really is. That's my gut feeling, is that we'll see people going like, holy smokes, what the fuck? And so you had this situation where they got out there and publicly said, yeah, it's going to be really hard for us to get this incredibly buzzy, popular game out on Xbox this year, because unfortunately we have to support the Series S. It is the exact scenario that Microsoft does not want out there floating around. They don't want anyone talking about like, oh, this game got held back because of the Series S. But it was very much a situation where they're like, we don't think we can get the game out this year because this is a really hard problem for us to solve. And, you know, we'll keep working on it. That's not a good look for them. So of course they sit down, they present their case. And by this time, I bet a person like Phil Spencer is plugged in enough that he has already heard of this and been like, shit, all right, we have to fix this. How do we fix this? Do we embed developers with them to get it done? Do we, you know, like they probably looked at a few different solutions as to like, how can we support Larian to make sure that this game gets out as soon as possible while people are still going crazy about it? Because if it comes out on PlayStation and then Xbox is like, I don't know, maybe it'll come out next year. Not that doesn't happen all the time with PlayStation games coming out first or whatever, but like in this specific situation, it's kind of a, you know, it's a perceived policy shooting them in the foot. And so they fixed it. And that's great. That's great for Xbox owners that want to play Baldur's Gate 3. The Series S owners won't get split screen co-op. That's unfortunate, I suppose. But hey, maybe they will still work on the split screen co-op and that will be added to the game at a later date. Who knows? I don't know if they're still going to try to tackle the problem or not, or what the situation is, but I think that's good news. I think any news where a console manufacturer is flexible to the needs of developers, to the stumbling blocks that a developer is encountering, anything they can do to make that environment more friendly for external developers to work on is a good thing. And I wish that, I guess that's a double-edged thing. I was gonna say, I wish that there were more stories like this out there, but at the same time, I think the fact that there aren't that many stories out there mean that generally speaking, the consoles have become a much friendlier place for independent developers. I mean, think about it. The concept of self-publishing is not that old. It was really the PS4 and Xbox One is when the idea of indie developers self-publishing their games first became a thing on console. Before that, we were mired in all the, you got to get a publisher who has an Xbox Live Arcade slot, and then there's only one game coming out a week, and then you signed a deal with this one. They've got 2 slots this year. Okay, they can put one out here, and they can put one out here. And like all the ways that stuff was managed and the way that smaller developers, the hoops they had to jump through to get their games out on consoles were ridiculous. I remember, Warner Brothers published Bastion. Like, just fucking weird. Anyway, good news. Good news. Baldur's Gate coming to Xbox this year. Epic is making moves on their store. They are trying to make their store more attractive to more developers, and so they have announced what they are calling the Epic First Run program. This is interesting. You've heard about Epic. Obviously, Epic has been offering exclusive deals to big publishers and saying like, "Hey, give us a year of exclusivity, and we'll give you more money. We'll give you a bunch of money." And so you have stuff like Dead Island and Borderlands 3 was they've Final Fantasy. There's been a bunch of games that the Epic Game Store has had exclusively for usually about a year. I think Saints Row just came out on Steam after being exclusive on Epic for a full year. That banger. Anyway, they are opening the door wider to basically anyone who wants it. The Epic First Run program is, and this is their statement about it. What is the Epic First Run program? Epic First Run is an opt-in exclusivity program that offers third-party developers 100% net revenue of user spending on eligible products in their first 6 months of exclusivity on the Epic Game Store. When the exclusivity period ends, the rev share captured from user spending will revert to 88-12, which is their standard split of developers getting 88%, Epic taking 12%. That is still a better cut than what Steam's cut is. I think the traditional kind of 70-30 cut or whatever. And basically, who can participate? The program is open to developers and publishers with registered Epic Games developer accounts and eligible products launching on or after October 16th. So basically they're saying like, hey, if you want to give us an exclusive on your game for 6 months, we will not take a cut of your revenue. Even that 12% that they take, they will just go like, here, keep it all for the first 6 months. And then at that point, you can come out on Steam or, you can be out on wherever the hell else. And they've got some other language in there about like, oh, you can still be on Epic First Run and still do keys through Green Man if you've got a deal there, or you sell your own keys on your website or whatever. You can still do those sorts of things. I am going to be really curious to see how many developers decide to take advantage of this. Power Yell says things must be going poorly for Epic. That is not the impression I get from talking to them, whether it's Dead Island or some of the other games that they have had exclusives on. I was not left with the impressions in some of the conversations I had that they are hurting or that this stuff is not working for them. I get the impression instead that they're just like, no, these exclusive games we're getting, they're selling just fucking fine. So I don't know. I know everyone loves to shit hard on Epic and their tactics that they're trying to use to grow their storefront. But I don't think they're necessarily worried about it. And yeah, the store has maybe not been a moneymaker for them in some of the court documents that came out around Apple, but I don't think that that's their goal just yet. I still think they're just like, yeah, man, I don't know. We're going to sell a bunch of fucking Fortnite skins and then the store's going to lose a bunch of money, but instead we're just going to keep growing it and growing it and growing it. And someday they'll find a way to get people who just play Fortnite to maybe buy another game. That is probably the largest untapped thing for them. They've been giving. I wonder what percentage of registered accounts actually takes the free games that Epic is giving away. And of the ones that do take them, how many of them actually play them? Compared to, Steam or whatever else. I don't know. Just because of how big Fortnite has been and people probably just play Fortnite. So this is an interesting move, and I will be curious to see how many developers take them up on this and try to launch their games exclusively on the Epic Store. Because, you always see the rhetoric. You see people out there going like, oh, and I'm occasionally, in this boat here where, Steam has become so entrenched that you're just like, oh, was that out? Oh, that's out on Epic? Okay, shit, I didn't even know. And so you have cases where people are like waiting for a game to come to Steam before they'll buy it. I feel like that is a minority of players. That's the impression I get, is that's maybe not as big of a, for as much as people are out there talking about like, I'm not gonna get Dead Island, like Saints Row, I'm gonna wait a year. Like, if people really want to play Saints Row, perhaps a bad example. They seem like they are willing to purchase it on the Epic Store just fine. Same with Dead Island 2, which is probably a better example than Saints Row. Or what, Final Fantasy Fist of Legend. Stranger of Paradise, right? That's the name of that game. They should have called it Fist of Legend. The fuck is wrong with me? Yeah, Stranger of Paradise. I don't know. What? Jet Li stars in Final Fantasy Fist of Legend. Anyway, that's an interesting development. I will, again, that will officially start. Games have to release on or after October 16th. And so we'll see. On the page that they are using to kind of promote the program to developers, they're saying, reach a global audience, digital distribution to over 230 million players with 68 million monthly active users. Again, I think the interesting thing there to see would be, of the 68 million people that use Epic on a monthly basis, what percentage of those players only have Fortnite in their library, or Fortnite and some free games? Like what percentage of them have actually spent dollars on non-Fortnite related goods? That's got to be a pretty high number. I'm guessing that the 68 million number is probably not as impressive once you filter out all of the Fortnite only players or free only players on top of that. And they will give you some placement on the homepage, editorial opportunities for participating in exclusive games. Like they're kind of making some offers around that stuff. And yeah, Epic kind of has I don't know that I would call it an editorial arm, but they are writing articles about games. Brian Crescente, formerly of Kotaku, amongst other places, I guess, is actually heading up that on an external basis, and he's bringing in writers to write articles about games on the Epic Store, I think is how that works. And that's interesting that they're trying to do that sort of stuff I think they should have some kind of like larger video output personally, but I feel that way about Steam. I think that there would be, they could do more along those lines if they really wanted to. The PlayStation Project Q got a name and a price. It is now referred to as the PlayStation Portal, the PSP. And it will be out later this year for $199.99, $200 for a remote play focused device. If you haven't seen the pictures of it, it's like someone took a DualSense controller and ripped it in half and bolted it to sides of a screen, but it's not a full, still has the grips and it'll still have all the haptics and everything there, but it is built purely for remote play from your own PlayStation 5, which I'm pointing at my own PlayStation 5, which is behind me here. This $200 for a remote play device. I feel like that use case is really like, hey, do you not have enough televisions in your house that you can, like you're like, the TV's in use, but I want to play PlayStation games. It's a good thing I spent $200 on this. I don't know, especially in a world where you can do that remote play on phones and you can, there's other ways to do that. People are saying that there's no Bluetooth pairing. Like, I guess people would want that for headphones or something, right? But it's, okay. I guess that makes sense for audio. But like the controller is bolted to it. You don't need to Bluetooth headphones to it or another controller to it. I don't know. Like, again, I don't know who this is for in a situation where, and I will grant you a phone is like, what do I have to 3D print a dumb plastic clamp or do I have to buy one of those stupid clamp controllers? And then, which, I'm not necessarily opposed to. It's really just the part where every time you want to use it, I've got to like now take my phone out of its fucking case so that I can fit the controller clamp on it. And all of that, and fuck that. That is a bridge too far for me, a person who is not that sold on the whole concept. If you are sold on the concept, maybe that's, I'm turning on the flashlight. Jesus Christ. Maybe that's like not that big a deal or whatever. But like, this just seems like a lot of money to spend for a thing that you could probably solve another way for way less money. It just doesn't seem that useful. I don't know, man. Like, PlayStation Portal Remote Player brings the PS5 experience to the palm of your hand. It includes the key features of the DualSense wireless controller, including adaptive triggers and haptic feedback. The vibrant 8-inch LCD screen is capable of 1080p resolution at 60 frames per second, providing a high-resolution visual experience that's expected from the high-quality games created by world-class developers. It will connect over Wi-Fi. This, of course, they need to say this, but like, it's not compatible with PlayStation VR games. Okay, you can't remote play your VR games on it. Yeah, no shit. But someone's gonna go like, wait, why can't I? I'm sure there's someone out there that is crazy. Yeah. So this. It includes a 3.5 millimeter audio jack for wired audio. It also supports something called PlayStation Link, which I found to be the actual interesting part of this announcement. As someone who was like, I don't know about the Portal, I don't know that I need that, is they also announced a new headset and new earbuds, and they are they have something they're calling PlayStation Link, a proprietary audio codec or whatever it ends up being, but it is low latency, lossless audio, which that has not been a thing that has been available for gaming. The devices that do that, the headsets that do that, end up being quite expensive. And so this ends up being a cheaper way to do this kind of low latency lossless audio. It'll also hook up to your PS5, but it does that over, like, there's a USB dongle, because every time Sony puts out a headset and it's wireless, there's always got to be an effing USB dongle. Am I right? At least it's built into the portal. You won't need to use the dongle on the portal. Anyway, I would love to see more low latency lossless audio. That's been something as an Apple AirPods user. I'm like, hey man, I've gone hardcore flack over here, motherfucker. Let's get it. They do say, you could take. They don't necessarily come out and say it, but you can do remote play out of your home. And so they are saying requires broadband internet Wi-Fi with at least 5 megabits for use. For a better play experience, a high-speed connection of at least 15 megabits per second is recommended. For if you want to use the PlayStation Portal, I guess, outside of the home. Which, I guess that's another option the Steam Deck has a client that will connect to PlayStation 5s. You can remote play PlayStation 5 games on the Steam Deck pretty well. I grant you, a Steam Deck is not $200. It is significantly more expensive, but also it does quite a bit more than the PlayStation Portal will ever do. The other thing I will say here is that in addition to them saying that PlayStation VR 2 games are not compatible, they also say that it only plays games that are locally installed on your PS5. You cannot do any of their cloud streaming stuff from this. So you can't play any of the PlayStation 3 games that are on your PlayStation account for streaming. It cannot do that. It will not stream a stream to you. I would, which to me makes me wonder, why wouldn't the device be able to connect to Sony's servers and get the shit directly? Why doesn't it do that? Why doesn't it do that? Is that something they'll patch in later? Like, why wouldn't they do that? Is the thing not powerful enough to do it? Because it can sure stream from my PS5. Why wouldn't it be able to stream directly from there? And obviously they're testing new cloud streaming stuff for PS5 games right now, and that stuff is not out yet. So maybe they're waiting for that stuff to hit, and then they will update the portal, or maybe this will all launch at the same time, and they'll be like, oh, by the way, it does do that now. But that's crazy to me. And that's like a weird use case. Why would it not connect to their online servers for the streaming stuff that they already do already? Like, forget the idea of, it'll stream to the PS5 and then the PS5 will stream to me, a stream within a stream, because that's dumb. They shouldn't support that. That's dumb. But why wouldn't it do? I mean, it has to connect to the internet. It has Wi-Fi support, right? Like, it's perfectly capable of streaming directly from my PS5 on my home ass bandwidth, where I've only got 40 megabits up. So why wouldn't it work? Why wouldn't they just say, and Rad Jago says, so you have to buy, it's because you have to buy, so that you have to buy a PlayStation 5. Like, okay, keep that requirement, but still let me do the other thing. Why wouldn't you? Like, this feels like a thing that should be stock and standard with this device of like, it can also connect to our shit. And it's insanely bizarre to me that that's not the case. I don't get it. Maybe there's some technical reason why they can't. But again, they are implying that you could remove this from your home. It doesn't need to be on local Wi-Fi, because if you couldn't remove it from your home, they would not be talking about you need to have broadband internet at home, because that should work on a LAN and do all that. Another question in the chat, is it OLED? No, it's LCD. Maybe they'll do an OLED version later. I don't know. Maybe it probably doesn't even have HDR. It's just, and again, $200 out later this year. I Yeah, I don't know. Yes, again, what they're saying is it has a vibrant 8-inch LCD screen, 1080p, 60 frames per second. That is what they are saying about the display on the device. So again, there's probably some like case where someone goes like, hey, this is actually perfect for me because we've only got one television and my kids are always watching goddamn Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. I don't know. And so now I can play my hardcore murder games while they are watching Funtime TV shows. I don't know. I think if you're, I don't know. If you're going to spend the money on a PlayStation 5, you should have another television. You should own 2 TVs. I don't know. Get the kids a fucking shitty TV and say, here, go watch Bluey on this thing. I'm over here on this OLED we bought. I don't know. Yes, apartment dwellers, I suppose. Apartment dwellers, put a TV in your bedroom. That is my advice. I don't know. But again, it just, I don't know. This feels like if the very narrow use case for this is people who live in apartments and only have a television and need to split time with someone else on a TV, and like we're skewing down narrower and narrower segments of people where you're like, well, why, is that enough people for a mass market? And the answer is they probably won't sell this at retail. This will probably be yet another thing. Like somebody's been on a hot streak lately of just saying like, fuck it, we're taking orders directly. I don't know. I would probably buy my kids a busted Android tablet and say, here you go, watch your shows on this while I use the television. And they would like that more because they like it up close like that. It's actually bad that, it's like my daughter, my kids will stand in front of this big TV and just watch Bluey and just go, and I was like, you guys are too close to this TV. Back the fuck up. I don't know. Anyway, last bit of news here. Gamescom happened. Not necessarily a ton of hot new info out of this. I guess, again, it was a lot of it was very focused on games that maybe we've already heard about or have already been announced. Jeff Keighley hosted the Gamescom opening night live and had a couple hours of trailers. And there we saw, they showed some Modern Warfare 3 gameplay, which didn't feel like anything new. After they spent a lot of time talking about this idea of open combat missions, they then went on to show a mission that was not one of those, or if it was one of those, then that's maybe a bigger problem. But they showed something that looked very scripted and very much follow this guy and do exactly what he says and shoot these people and do, like very traditional Call of Duty campaign type stuff. Which seemed weird. Alan Wake 2 was shown. We saw a little bit more of that. I think that game continues to look really amazing. The release date of that got a slight push to later in October. They're saying it's because, hey, Spider-Man and some other big games are coming out, so they want to find a better slot for it, which I think that's fine. And if they need some extra time, sure, why not? They showed a little bit more of the Cyberpunk DLC and some of the skill revamp stuff, which felt a little, it continues to feel a little too late for me. New Mortal Kombat trailer showing some new characters, and that's got to be if not their last trailer, well, one of their last trailers before launch, because that game is coming out pretty soon. The game is like, mid-September, so we're just about there. They showed season 2 of Diablo 4. And season 1 is still underway. To me that felt a little, I don't know. I guess I am no longer in touch with how people feel about Diablo 4 because I started feeling bad enough about it that I'm no longer playing it. And so for me, like showing, hey, we got season 2 coming up and there's vampire stuff was enough for me to just go like, I want to see more on the approach of how can we make Diablo 2 a better game, as opposed to here's a new season that will have a new battle pass, that will have a new blah blah blah, that will have a new this. So yeah, I don't, that's not, but again, I am out of Diablo 4 pretty much. I still have it installed. There's always some part of me that's like, maybe I would check this out a little bit more, but yeah, I don't know. Some new Stormgate units, they said the Crew Motorfest is going to have a 5-hour trial. They showed a Sonic Superstars trailer. They had a big Hoyoverse block and showed Zenless Zone Zero, a bunch of very flashy looking stuff between that and Honkai Star Rail. I was like, what's the name of the train game? Can't remember. Trains. Tekken 8 got a date. They showed what, yeah. Tekken 8, they framed it up as like, hey, there's going to be a story mode and look at all this stuff. And then they showed this trailer that you're like, this is, as a fan of the wild shit that Street Fighter 6 just did, this doesn't seem like it's on the level of that, which is perhaps an unfair expectation. But just the same, that's not the stuff that whatever. Fucking Tekken 8 looks fucking awesome. I don't want dumb chibi avatars and all that. I don't care. I don't care about like that stuff. But the traveling around to other arcades and trying to have a story mode around that is at least like an interesting idea. New Assassin's Creed Mirage trailer, that's out in about a month now, so that's kind of right around the corner. Black Myth Wukong, Little Nightmares 3. There's stuff, right? But I think in terms of just like the big like world shattering, like it didn't. The show didn't really have that going for it. And again, like Jeff Keighley got out there ahead of the show and pretty much said as much. And hey, some of these games are games we'll be playing very soon. September, October releases. Between Alan Wake and Mortal Kombat and Call of Duty, and some of this stuff is coming very, very soon. So that's pretty awesome. Thank Goodness You're Here is a trailer you should go out and look at if you have not seen it. It's got a weird. You should go look at Thank Goodness You're Here. That's all I'll say about that. It's a kick-ass trailer. I am very excited about that one, I guess I would say. And then, the other kind of Gamescom news has not been super hot. People got some hands-ons with some different modes and different games and, and some of that people who were there in attendance. So, builds of games were shown and, some hands-on impressions for, like I think Black Myth Wukong and some of the other stuff. So yeah, like that's always good. But yeah, not a ton of like big old flashy news. Fuzzy Assassin in the chat says, I saw a rumor that Nintendo showed people the new Switch behind closed doors. If we believe that there are dev kits out there and that they are going through the process of disclosing facts about the system to more and more developers as time goes on, then I suppose I could be brought to believe that more developers were walked through that process at Gamescom, but everything timeline wise would sound more like that they're still in the process of working with very select developers and walking them through it in a very personal way that doesn't necessarily have to happen at Gamescom, but sure, perhaps. That would not be that big of a deal. They are probably not out there showing it to press, is what I would say. But yeah, sure. Maybe they're showing it to more developers. Maybe they're getting dev kits out to more developers. All of that is viable. If we take the previous news as the previous reports, I suppose I should say, as factual, that yes, they're starting to get dev kits out there, then it would follow. It would make sense that perhaps they would try to have some of those meetings in or around Gamescom. So yeah, if that did happen, and I don't know, sure. Yeah. And that's it for the news. Nintendo is going to have a Super Mario Wonder focused direct later this week. I will not be watching that live with you, unfortunately, due to some timing issues. We ended up with a bunch of dentist and doctor appointments all this week. I don't know how that happened, but very, very hot week. But that's just gonna be a 15-minute video about Super Mario Wonder. You don't need me talking over it live. Maybe on Friday we will watch it together or something like that if it seems like that's worth doing. I don't know. And that's it for the news. Why don't we get into some emails here? podcast@guard.bike is the email address. Send me your emails and I will read them. In fact, I'm going to look at them right now. There are 4 more of them that have come in since the show started. Let's see. We'll take that one. Aftermoth writes in and says, I saw the Gran Turismo movie. Congratulations. And while I have a lot of gripes with the movie, it felt like an ad for Sony, shoehorning in Polyphony Digital, saying GT is the best racing simulation, etc. Nothing bothered me more than their decision to use the PlayStation 5 UI sound effects for literally everything in the movie. Cars overtaking each other or any sci-fi motion graphics. It's the PS5 confirm sound or menu open sound. Video game sound effects that aren't accurate don't usually bother me, but this was egregious. I had no idea this was in there. That's fucking crazy. Like the idea that they're using PS5 menu noises as cars are passing each other, that sounds like a positively breathtaking experience. A related thing came into my Tumblr here. I'll just take it here because why not? Chubbigans wrote in and said, I saw Gran Turismo in 4DX. When they sprayed champagne all over people on the podium in the movie, I got sprayed with water in the theater, and the whole damn seat felt like it was going to throw me down the stairs during the crash scenes. 10 out of 10. Great way to watch dumb movies in the stupidest way possible. That sounds fucking incredible. That sounds like the only way you would ever possibly get me to leave my home to watch the Gran Turismo film would be if they sprayed water in my face at various points in the film. That actually sounds fucking great. That movie sounds just fucking abysmal, man. But goddamn, that's what we need more of. More, I saw one or two of the Fast and the Furious movies in fucking, seat moving mode, and that was fun, but I always felt that it should be way more harsh, like way more abrupt and hard and fucking crazy. Like D-Box was not extreme enough. And so if 4DX is, a more powerful seat, and also the idea of them spraying water in your face, they need to do scents. If they're not doing scents, they need to be spraying scents at you. Like, I want to smell burning tires just all the time. It's me, the arsonist who starts tire fires. No, and I like they should do that. They should, like, let's get the scented movie experience off the ground. God, I remember, this is probably fucking 15 years. I don't know. This is a very long time ago now that we went to GDC and saw someone that had a bunch of aromas plugged into a USB thing. And their whole thing was like, yeah, man, we're going to hook this up. And so games can spray the scents in your face, man. It's going to fucking revolutionize gaming, man. Especially for VR and everything. But this is it. We're doing it. We're doing Scent-O-Vision. And I remember smelling some of the scents and just being like, you're telling me what this is supposed to smell like. And I disagree. And I've never heard about it ever again. So I'm sure it went very well for them. But yeah, we should really be going all the way with this horrific technology. All right, let's get into older emails. Patrick in Maryland writes in and says, do you have any opinions about the value given to a perfect review score from Famitsu? Do you or any of the publications you worked for ever consider trying to replicate that? Are there really no NES, SNES, or Genesis games that deserved a perfect score? Link to the Past getting a 39, but Bayonetta getting a 40 seems silly to me. I think in terms of like scoring systems where their highest score mattered, we definitely back at GameSpot treated that as a very, very, very... I was the first person to give a 10 on GameSpot, and it was Ocarina of Time. And I had to struggle to give that game a 10. One of the founders of the site basically grilled me for 45 minutes or something. Like, hey, are you sure? And I remember one of his things being like, well, this game doesn't have voice acting. Wouldn't it be better with voice acting? And I was like, no. Also, the N64 cartridge, if we're reviewing these consoles in the context of what they're capable of and all that, like the N64 cartridge space, like that would just not be a thing. And so it was like this dissertation, like I had to defend it before we could run the review. And then we gave the 10. And then I gave, I believe I gave Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 a 10. They've given a lot more 10s and like it's at some point. So we used to write words under the numbers, and the number that was the word that was associated with 10 was perfect. Which no game is perfect. It's dumb. But it made it a situation where like that 10 was almost impossibly hard to get. And that made it matter. Edge does the same thing, like getting a high score from Edge is obviously very difficult as well. Like they've been good vanguards of their scoring system and have made that matter. I was also the person that said we need to stop writing the word perfect under 10. This is ridiculous. We need to start using the whole scale, and this is just silly. And so I believe Greg Mueller came up with the word prime, and we changed it from perfect to prime. Spring Break My Heart asks, what was the in-office reaction to Chrono Cross getting a 10 and Game of the Year? I was fine with it at the time because I did not play the game. I was managing reviews. The review came in giving it a 10. I was like, fuck, man, really? Because no one internally was in a position to vouch for it because we had not played it. And I believe it was a review of the Japanese version of the game on top of that. So we had to go to another freelancer who who spoke Japanese and had played the game and be like, you think, is this really? And he vouched for it. We talked about it a lot before that game got a 10. People love Chrono Cross. I don't have an opinion on the game personally. But I know people love that game. So, but part of that, I think factors into just like, you you should use your full scale, and that includes the top of the scale. And what are you trying to say when you review games? Like how, especially as games became more and more segmented, like it got to a point where you couldn't just say every person who plays video games should play this game. I don't think there's, maybe I'm wrong here, but I don't know that there are any games that I would say that about anymore. Right? I think that there are always going to be people who were just like, I'm not into the, there are people that are saying that Baldur's Gate 3 is definitely the game of the year, is definitely this, but I'm not a big fan of Baldur's Gate 3. Do I think it deserves all the high review scores it's getting? Fucking absolutely. But it's not for me. It's fine. And I think that like gaming has, again, we were talking about this year in particular earlier, like everything is spread out and there's so many different types of games and so many different things that like some people will want to play and other people will never want to touch, and vice versa. And that's good for games. That's great for games. But if you were in the business of having a 10 try to mean this game's perfect, anyone who is the least bit interested in video games should play it, and you gave a game like, probably like Armored Core, which I've not played a ton of, but and certainly like a game like Baldur's Gate, I think there's very specific scenarios where there's just like, hey, people just aren't going to be into this type of game. It's fine. I was not into Chrono Cross. Because I was not into those types of games anymore. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Anyone who is the least bit interested in video games should be playing that game right goddamn now. No, I mean, even that to an extent, right? But yeah. So I think that having your highest score be this weirdly barely attainable thing. It's interesting, and it creates some buzz around your publication when a game does hit that mark, and it does create a situation where you're saying this game is on a different level when you do that, and that comes with negatives as well as positives. Now the question that Patrick is asking is, do you have any opinions about the value given to a perfect review score from Famitsu? Yes, I do. I think their review scores are fucking worthless. I think they always have been. We have had multiple situations where we have heard from publishers back in the day where they said, oh yeah, we negotiated with Famitsu to get a 40, or hey, we originally this game was getting a 32 and we talked them up to a 38. I put no value in Famitsu's review scores, and I think it's foolish, especially and I don't follow them these days. I don't know, maybe they've put their shit back together and they're not on the take like that. But we just heard of multiple situations where, like, there were cases where Famitsu had not been printed yet, and I had someone telling me what Famitsu's review score was. Because the publisher knew what Famitsu's review score was going to be, because they had worked with them to get it. This is decades ago now, so I don't know. And the other thing I would say is, I experienced a version of this when I went to Japan. We were talking last week about my time when I went to I guess it was the AM show or the AMO, whatever, I went to one of their arcade shows. And that was the show where Capcom Fighting All-Stars was shown. But I was there to interview the head of the person running Soul Calibur at the time. I forget if it was Soul Calibur 2 or 3, whichever one it was. And we were getting an exclusive interview with this person, and I went out there to conduct that interview. And we had a translate, we had our guy in Japan, Ike, who Ike was fantastic. And he lived in the US with us for a long time. And then he moved back home and he, was sending us magazines and sending us, it's like, hey, we need some games. And he would get them as fast as he could and ship them overnight. And so we would get all this cool shit. It's how we got PS2s, I think, anyway. So we conducted the interview. It was very straightforward, nothing out of the ordinary in it. Just like, and there wasn't that much to say. It's a very early exclusive interview about Soul Calibur. Like, there's not much to talk about just yet. They had the game playable there at the show. And I've told this story before, but like, as we were kind of getting up and as we were done with the interview, the PR people were like, okay, so yeah, if you could send the interview over so that we can look at it and make changes or, whatever, and then we'll get it back to you and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I think I just kind of got out of the room, was like, oh yeah, we'll talk later. And then like fucking booked it out of there and was like, fucking what? Like, absolutely. Are you fucking high? Like we are absolutely not sending a fucking interview. We're not sending anything to a publisher to give them any kind of fucking final say or sign off on it. Like, that is not how this fucking works, but apparently in Japan, that was how that worked. And so as I kind of went through this process of us going absolutely not, and them saying, well, you can't run it, and us going like, well, what the fuck are we going to do here? What I found out was that's apparently very commonplace in Japan. And as a result of that, oftentimes those interviews are much more wide ranging and loose and casual, and much more like, we're just shooting the shit. I'm going to tell you everything about this game, but we're not announcing this for 9 months. And so you're not going to print that. Instead of saying, hey, this part's off the record, we're just going to have a conversation and then PR is going to tell you what is off the record. And that was my understanding as to how that stuff worked back then. I think what we ended up doing, because, so I didn't conduct the interview that way. So there was nothing in there that they were going to cut out, because I knew what we were talking about. I knew what the focus of the interview was. I knew where we were at. It's like, I'm not a fucking idiot. Like, there's no point. And people would always say, oh, I can't believe you didn't ask about this. And it's like, it's because I've been doing this for a while, and the parameters of, like, unless you want to waste your interview time with them going like, oh, well, no, we're not ready to talk about that over and over again. You figure out like where your wiggle room is. Where can we maybe get something that no one else is asking about? Where can we try to get in and get something that is unique to us and our interview, but it's still in the parameters of, you just announced the fucking game. You've announced 3 playable characters. I'm not going to walk in there and be like, so is Sofatia going to be in the game? Like, it's not the fucking point. It's a waste of time. I think what we ended up doing is we just said, well, like, they're going to be fucking real weird if we don't send them something. And so we sent them the interview, and we said to ourselves, there is no situation where we are ever, if they recommend changes, we are not making them. We are running this article as is. We will send it to them, but if they send back changes, we are fucking, oh, we didn't get that email. We are fuck you, basically, at that point. We were like, nope, not going to do that. But to get them to shut the fuck up, here you go. And they didn't have any changes. Which ends up making the whole thing a weird, it's like, I feel like we acted as best we could for the right reasons, and then it was all for nothing or whatever, because they didn't have any changes to begin with. But it was a very frustrating, it's the only time I've had that happen, which, to be clear, I have not done that many interviews in Japan over the years, but we did not encounter that specific situation very many times. I cannot think of a single one. And granted, I was mostly on reviews, so maybe the preview team ran into that situation in other situations, but that's the only one I was ever a part of. And so that, combined with kind of hearing about some of the Famitsu score stuff and everything else, really just kind of because I think up until that point there was a certain mystique around Famitsu scores, and when you would hear about a game getting a 40, you're like, ooh. But that was definitely like once I got in the business long enough and someone pulled back the curtain and someone fucking smartened me up about the business over there. I was just like, oh, well, yeah, all right. That's fucking terrible. Like, I do not have respect for that. And And so it goes. So no, if you're asking me, do I have opinions about the value given to a perfect score from Famitsu? I suppose the answer is yes. I guess I do have some opinions on it, but I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I don't know how they're running it these days. I don't, that's all the stuff we heard. And now I'm talking about things that were really, 20 years ago. So I don't know but also the other thing I would say is I don't see anyone talking about Famitsu anymore either. So I don't know what the fuck they're doing. I'm sure there's some forum thread somewhere that someone is still like copying down the Famitsu review scores like it's a big deal or something. But like, I don't know. To me, Edge always seemed like that they were really, again, protective about their review scale and protective about their stuff in general. Which, I heard a lot of really depressing stories about some of the stuff that the way things worked in the UK for a long time as well. But Edge always sounded like they were very much on the up and up and not about that bullshit. So, and I don't think it's that way anymore over there either. Grant writes in and says, if Sony made Medieval 3 as a Dark Souls clone, would you be interested? It seems so ripe for a sequel, but maybe that's more of a PS4 Sony thing and not the boring one under the current regime. Sure, I don't know. Like, I'm not that big of a Dark Souls fan, and I'm not that big of a Medieval fan, so I'm probably not the right guy for this. But sure, if you had to do something with Medieval, that's something you could definitely do. That's definitely something you could do if you wanted to bring that franchise back. That could be cool. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be that, but that would be a way to modernize it. I think, in a way that was more palatable to modern tastes than if they just said like, hey, you like Medieval 1 and 2, here's Medieval 3, and it was the same type of game. I don't think that would do anything. Joe in Seattle writes in, I have been an Xbox enjoyer for years. Recently, though, I've been frustrated by the compromised nature of games on the quote-unquote most powerful console ever. 30 frames per second makes me nauseous, so I finally jumped ship and got my hands on a very spicy gaming PC. What are your typical first thing to do's when breaking in a new PC? What should I turn off? What should I install? What am I doing wrong? So far, I've downloaded some shit on Game Pass, installed Steam, and installed Battle.net so I can play Overwatch. Because Overwatch is good and everyone is wrong. What dope-ass PC-only games should I fuck around with? Yeah, I would go into startup apps and disable most of the stuff in there once you realize what it is. I leave about a quarter of the stuff enabled on this machine because it's, because I know what it does and why it's there and why it needs to be there. So I would say don't go reading, here's a tutorial about how to optimize your gaming PC by turning shit off. Here's a script you can run that will get your gaming PC to get rid of the bloatware. Like, there's a ton of just like, here's a fucking hacked up, fucked up version of Windows you can install that turns off all the bullshit. And don't do any of that, because especially ones that have you downloading weird, shady, fucked up versions of Windows. Like, don't do that. Because that seems like it could be an attack vector, and maybe it's not, but like at the same time, not good practice, not a good, not the way you want to live. I haven't really had to do much. I think that Windows does a pretty good job these days. Windows 11, I like quite a bit. In terms of things to install, man, for me, it's like it's Notepad++. Especially if you're going to be editing any INI files or any config files or something, Notepad++ is a better notepad. Yeah, I don't know, Firefox, I guess. Yeah, I would uninstall Chrome if you've installed it. and I would instead use Firefox. I would get some good Firefox add-ons, I suppose. Yes, but yeah. Honeybucket says buy a copy of WinRAR. 7-zip is actually one of among the first things I download when getting a new PC, because I will invariably have to unzip some shit or un7z some shit. Edge is getting a lot better. Yeah, people in chat are defending Microsoft Edge, which just shows you how far we've come as a people. But yeah, I don't know. It's if you're, Steam and some games. I like the GeForce experience because it notifies me when a driver is available, and it will occasionally recommend settings for a game. And if you don't want to, if you're new to the PC and you're not going to necessarily understand, I'm not new to the PC, and game settings are getting so esoteric that I oftentimes don't know what that shit is doing. And so, you can get most of the way there with the GeForce, assuming you have an NVIDIA card, I guess. If you don't, then I don't know what the fuck AMD has. Adrenaline or, whatever it is. But yeah, I think, the having that at least like recommend some settings at least gives you a starting point to fuck around with further if you want to. And so that's not too bad in the grand scheme of things. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. What else, man? I don't think there's that much like must install stuff specifically from like a gaming perspective, Yeah, you could install WinDirstat and you can install everything if you're looking to search your system more effectively. Everything is a great tool for that. But I think the list of things I actually install on a PC has gotten so much shorter over the years. It used to be stuff like I've got to copy my font directory over, and I've got to export my inbox from Thunderbird, and so I can re-import it after reinstalling Thunderbird on the other end. And I've got and so much of that is done different ways nowadays. I like VLC. Some fucking psychos out there are still running forks of MPC instead of VLC, to which I say, best of luck with that, you fucking psychos out there watching Chromehounds videos in MPC HE or whatever the fuck. Psychos. I would say, hey, Overwatch is now on Steam, and so you don't need to have Battle.net installed to play it. You said you are installing Battle.net to play Overwatch. You can ditch that. VLC is old nowadays, says Rain One. Hey, you could always install the VLC 4 nightlies. They've rebuilt it in ways that make it significantly worse. It's wonderful. I like Foobar 2000 because it will take plugins that will play, NSFs and other emulator, but none of that's vital, crucial stuff. That's, if you're into it, you're into it. Patrick from Alabama writes in and says, Starfield is charging $99. That's 30 days extra for 5 days of early access. And this seems to be a trend happening across games that people just seem to accept. My gut reaction is that this is bad, and we have accepted what are essentially forced time delays on game releases. Maybe this is good, letting studios get more money for a game and not need to charge more. I would love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, it's the head start thing on single player games, I think, is especially kind of weird. When it's a multiplayer game, I think sometimes that can make more sense because then you're getting a jump start. You're going to level up your character faster or whatever. So there's some kind of different benefit there. But also, this is just kind of like that is also coming with the expansion pack or whatever. Constantly, I forget what the fuck it's called, but the DLC is included with this version of the game as well, right? So in a lot of ways you are just, it's like, hey, by buying the deluxe version of this game, you are also getting to play it early. in a world where sometimes games ship fucking broken, I might say let the people pay more to test the day one patches for you and wait until it is done if that is something that you are concerned about or whatever. I actually think in the case of like a Call of Duty, I think it is interesting because they're not giving you early access to the multiplayer. Instead, it's like, hey, we will let you, this is what they did last year, it sounds like they're doing it this year, is you will get early access to the campaign. And so you can play the campaign ahead of everyone else. I actually think that's interesting because the campaign in Call of Duty is specifically something that you just kind of get through and never think about ever again. That's not to say they're bad. I'm not talking too much shit here. But the idea of just like, hey, I finished the campaign and now the multiplayer servers go up in a couple of days and I'll be ready to, I'll just be ready to get with that. I'm not going to go play the campaign and take that time away from the multiplayer when I could be grinding out levels and camos and whatever other stuff. Like, I think that's kind of cool. It helps put a focus on the campaign, which is something that Call of Duty hasn't had for a long time. And I think that's kind of neat. But I think about it, I tend to think about it as like, they were already charging this amount of money for games and not giving people early access. So it's kind of an extra checkbox for them that makes that more expensive package more attractive. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. It's funky. It is a little weird, I will grant you. And it is something that they can use, particularly in MMOs or other games like that, where it's like, you get access to the Firefall head start. Where are the people that paid extra to get a head start on Firefall? Where are they now? All 12 of them. I don't even know if Firefall did a head start. But like the concept of the MMO head start has existed for a long time. And that's a situation where you've got a kind of captive audience of people that don't want to get left behind. And so you're kind of preying on that when you do head starts on MMOs and multiplayer games and all of that. So I think that stuff can be a little funky. But again, these prices are not new. They were already doing things, it doesn't feel like they're necessarily charging extra for the early access. It is more like, hey, this game was going to come out on Tuesday, but you can start playing it on Friday. And I don't necessarily have a huge problem with that. Again, I think people need to use their own judgment and make their own call on that. That's something that, you do not have to buy that under any circumstances. So, and there are pre-order bonuses and stuff that end up, I think, being way more egregious where, like Call of Duty does a pre-order, hey, Mortal Kombat just did it, where if you pre-ordered the game, you get to play the beta. And I think that some of that stuff is weirder. I think that's sometimes I think that's a little weirder, where pre-order to play, pre-order to help us with a server slam or something, I think is always a little weird, because it's like, here's a limited time weekend demo for a game that you're only letting people who already bought it play, as opposed to like the actual purpose of a demo, which is to get people to buy the game. It's a little funky, but I guess the practice of the early access thing, I don't necessarily have like a sweeping problem with. It's more the kind of the overall concept of like, hey, here's a premium edition that comes with a bunch of garbage, and you pre-ordered so you get these skins, or you get the, like all of that. Like that stuff's always been a little weird. Paul writes in and says, Paul writes in with an email, subject line, "The dumbass truth about Xbox online play." Okay, Paul. I bought the game Killing Floor 2 a few years ago because my friends were playing it. I don't play much online, but I enjoyed the game. Back then I had Xbox Live Gold. Now I don't, so I can't play it. So I can go download a much newer game like Fortnite or Apex and play online 24 hours a day, but I can't play Killing Floor 2, a game I actually bought. This is something Microsoft and PlayStation need to fix. I think that's okay. Yeah, I suppose when you say you can play weird free games for free, but a game you actually purchased you cannot play, that you are not wrong. But why it is that way is because games like Apex and games like Fortnite are selling skins and selling weapon skins and packs of skins and founders packs. And do you want to have a parachute that has the fucking guy, the troll face guy on it, or whatever the fuck they're selling this month? What's the hot new IP that Fortnite is selling this month? I don't, we've got Sledgehammer from the hit TV show Sledgehammer in Fortnite this month. It's a parachute that has a picture of his gun on it. And when you make him dance, he says, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Yeah, you've got Call of Duty free to play, and they will happily sell you Nicki Minaj, which I purchased. Because I also purchased Snoop Dogg, and I was just like, well, I just want to keep this ridiculous. I am not going to buy 21 Savage because I have no interest in 21 Savage as a performer or as a person. And then Lara Croft. So whatever. The reason is because those games make a ton of money, and so that is where they make their money. They make even more money selling you skins, and Microsoft and PlayStation get a cut of all of that. And so that kind of subsidizes, if you want to think about it this way, those games being playable. Also, those games don't use PlayStation's servers or Microsoft servers, I think, in those cases, where maybe Killing Floor 2 does. I don't, And so that is why that happens, is because it gets more people playing the game and they make more money overall on skins and bonus content. So you kind of have to pick your poison with this when you are asking for this. Would you rather that you purchased Killing Floor 2 but still have to pay a fee to play it online? Or would you rather Killing Floor 2 be a free-to-play game that is then monetized out the ass? I don't know what I think the answer for that is going to be different for everyone. I think the answer to that is going to be different depending on the game. And so but that is the why behind that, is the, hey, these games are free to play. We don't want to charge for access to this, and and they make their money the other way. And I think that's largely a benefit because it means that any player gets to play those games. Any player who doesn't spend any money on those games gets to play it for free. So yeah, it's a real monkey puzzle. No, I don't know. It's a real. I don't know what the actual answer is to that. But that's why you cannot play Killing Floor 2. Is because they will make no further money on Killing Floor 2. So you have to pay them for access to play it online. I saying it out loud, it is a shitty answer. But I feel fairly confident that that is the actual answer. Buy it again on PC, I guess. That's PC is still immune to the whole concept of paying to play online. And you know, I wonder sometimes if we will get there on Xbox and PlayStation. Right now they make too much money to walk away from it. But now that PlayStation Plus is wrapped up in their streaming service and they have multiple tiers of service, and now that Xbox Live Gold is kind of, you know, going away in favor of different tiers of Game Pass service and what have you, I wonder if this eventually leads down a road where they do remove that barrier. But right now, both of the console manufacturers make way too much money on people paying to play online, especially with something like a Call of Duty, that they can't walk away from that. If we give it another 5 or 10 years, we'll see. Which is, again, not an amazing answer, but I do think that's the case. Daddy Warbucks from Oregon writes in and says, so many games would be so much better if they just had little to no narrative. Borderlands 3 is probably my biggest example. Great, fun gameplay ruined by unskippable, terribly written dialogue about some shit I haven't cared about for 3 games. After playing so many games with mediocre stories, I've just lost all patience for it. If you can't write a compelling narrative, then just let the narrative take a back seat. I think that's why I gravitate so much towards indie games these days. They aren't afraid to just let a video game be a video game. I might also say that indie games are where you can go to find a lot of very compelling narratives. So you kind of get both ends on that one, depending on what you're looking for. I think that the writing in Borderlands 3, I think the characters, I think the voice performances, I think that stuff is abysmal. And it is stuff that gets in the way of a game that is still pretty good. You know, mission based. Like the hook in Borderlands has never been, what are these vault hunters gonna get up to next? What will Lilith do next? That crazy siren. No one fucking cares. And so even the writers don't necessarily care about that in a grand scheme. It is instead more of a, I think the Borderlands games have been written in a way where they are joke factories. Bad joke factories. But Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3, less so the first game. But Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3 just kind of leaned on just like, here we go. We're going to attempt to cram in as many fucking jokes as we can here. And most of them are fucking not going to land, but we work in volume. And that stuff's really rotten. I think Borderlands 1 is fine. I think the writing in Borderlands 1 is fine. I think I'm not going to sit here and tell you it holds up or whatever, but I think for the time that game came out and they did not go as hard, like fucking Borderlands 2 is like someone opened up fucking knowyourmeme.com and said, what are the hottest ones? Can we play off that? And then by the time they got to Borderlands 3, it was just like, I don't know, just very grating performances. It's not even necessarily the writing in Borderlands 3. It is more the characters, the way those characters perform. Whether it's Penn and Teller or whether the twins, the characters that play the streamers, they're not even effectively written like bad streamers. It is just it's bad. I don't think you could just have no narrative. I think that you could scale it back and do better. But I think there is a world built in Borderlands, and so you kind of have to have something you're working towards that's not just kill 10 rats. I think if that game went full on kill 10 rats, go here, kill 10 more, you would eventually, the guns are cool and the loot is fun, but you would eventually kind of lose something in the process and be like, why am I fucking doing this? And so I think that there's like, it's the thing of like, whether we're talking about stories or whether we're talking about, it's plot versus premise, right? Like, some games have a good premise and a bad plot. Some games have a great premise that doesn't land on the moment-to-moment character dialogue and whatever else, right? There's just a lot of shit there that just goes sideways. And I think gaming is perfectly capable of telling great stories. Like, I think some people, tend to just shit on the concept of games having stories to tell. And I think that there are plenty of ways. I think, the best stories would be games that take advantage of the medium. And, it's like it's an inherently interactive medium. And if we're just watching static cutscenes, this is my Metal Gear Solid 1 argument. As unpopular as it may be, this is my Final Fantasy 7 argument. This is I don't want to fucking just sit here and just watch fucking cutscenes. And that has evolved into, I don't want to just do the Gears of War walk and talk either, because me technically having control of the character while you fucking dump narrative on me is not fun either. So yeah, finding ways to make that interactive, finding ways to make that a bigger part of the game, finding ways to make it feel natural in the context of an experience that you are inherently in control of. Those are things that, when gaming can take care of that, or find ways to work around that in ways that, a narrative doesn't overstay its welcome, or, like finding ways to, like, if you have to do a big lore dump, find ways to make that still cool. I think that, it's easier said than done. But yeah, I don't know. I can also think of cases where there are games that almost kind of throw the narrative aside in some points just to get you to the next plot point in a way that then feels kind of unearned, and that sucks too. So I don't think it's as simple as this one size fits all, like, we just gotta let a video game be a video game. It's like, no, like, every video game is going to need something different when it comes to that aspect of the game. Obviously, at some extreme end, we've got visual novels and things like that are, more reading or listening than gaming. That type of interactive fiction. And then at the other end of that, you've got, like, I was going to say, like, roguelites and so on and so forth, where you're just kind of like establishing a world and saying, go do this over and over again. But then you've got something like a Hades that proves you can have both. That you can still have a compelling story and compelling characters and great writing and all of this stuff in the confines of a game that you were playing over and over again. And yeah, that doesn't even get into games with emergent narratives and, like Dwarf Fortress, or, like things where the player story is coming out. I would say Minecraft. There is a story. I mean, obviously there is lore in Minecraft. There is a through line. There's a beginning and an end. But Minecraft does the thing that Destiny wanted to do, right? Like the player-driven story. You're not going to believe the fucking crazy thing I did last night. I think that stuff's really awesome too. When it's done well, when it's done in a game that is compelling enough for that to work, I think that, like, having, I think there are, again, gaming, especially over recent years, I think has proven that there are so many different ways to tell a compelling story, to build a compelling universe, whether that's, undertelling it in some cases, the way a Dark Souls does, and, and then you've got the guy that can make the 7-hour lore video based on, like, did you see this one corpse? Because if you look at this corpse, and if you pick up this item and turn it around, there's 3 sentences here that if you read these 3 sentences, and if you really know what they're talking about, it's going to be that, that sort of thing. That's awesome too. all the way, yeah, down to Disco Elysium, where you've got inherent control over how parts of that story go and how your character is perceived in ways that are just like massive. Yeah, so I don't think it's as simple. Like, yeah, are there some games that would do better? Like, yeah, Borderlands 3, if they had boiled it down to like, hey, yeah, there's a plot here, you're going to meet some characters, and they're going to be a little witty. They're a little crazy, these oddballs, but not been like radioing you every, so often to remind you that like this is the most fucking annoying video game on the planet. That would be an improvement for sure. But yeah. I don't know. It's a tough balance to strike. I think that's definitely something I've learned from watching people that are narrative designers talk about their experience making games, and especially in cases where they're fighting against, like, hey, we want to get a little more narrative in here against a team that might not think it belongs in certain spots and struggling to get these things in there. Different games handle it differently. Different games treat their narrative designers differently, and there's a lot of interesting stories to be told about the stories that are told in games. Robbie from Akron writes in and says, do you think the next system from Nintendo will take a step towards the tablet market, aka featuring more of a true app store, giving Nintendo's innovative design philosophy and their plan to make the next console another handheld hybrid being more like a tablet seems like a forward-thinking step to reach the younger tablet generation. I don't think they have what it takes to run an app store, but that's never stopped Nintendo before. Do you think they might go in this direction? And do you think that leads to TikTok on the Switch too? The eShop is an app store. And there are some non-gaming things on the Switch, right? Fewer than there were on the 3DS. But the answer is no. In the way that you're thinking, in terms of like, will it have an app store the way a tablet has an app store? Not in a million years. No. Not even that. Nintendo would never take the reins off of for a variety of reasons. Would we see TikTok on the Switch? No. I really don't think that will happen. I don't think we will see phone-style apps appearing on a Nintendo device ever. And my reasoning for that is twofold. One, there is a level of control that Nintendo likes to have over its devices that do not lend themselves well to the openness of an app store. As much as you say, oh, well, YouTube got on the 3DS and got on, there was a YouTube app and that you could watch all sorts of curse-filled videos there. Like, yeah, I mean, there are M-rated games on the Switch now as well. So, there's that sort of stuff. But, again, think about Nintendo and think about Nintendo's decision-making process through the lens of they are about family and they are about fun for the family. And try to think about what they would do in that context, because that is the approach that they will think to take. They will think to take, like, what is going to be good for families that want to use this? How does this integrate into a family? How does this, and an open wide app store full of God knows what is not what they're looking for. I will be curious to see what they do going forward with the eShop, because I think the eShop has gotten away from them. I think that all of the indie published vaguely, it's not AO, it's not nudity, it's not full on hentai, but it's a lot of games that are implying to be more than they are being sold on the eShop for 97 cents and all this. There's a lot of weird shit that showed up on the eShop, and you're like, that seems strange that Nintendo would allow this on their platform. And they should allow games on their platform. But the way they built the specials section in terms of, there was stuff that about the way they built the eShop that make it so that you can gamify your placement on the shop and get your weird, vaguely hentai-esque game to show up in places it probably doesn't belong. And discoverability on the eShop is bad, but discoverability on everything is bad. Discoverability on Steam is bad. Discoverability on the Epic Store is bad. Discoverability on the PlayStation Store is bad. The Xbox Store is bad. In terms of like discoverability for the full breadth of games that are coming out on a regular basis, it is bad across the board. Xbox probably does the best job of all of them simply because they devote the most real estate to it, and they also devote real estate to games that are on Game Pass. And so the front page of an Xbox is, something like 2/3 of it is an ad for games. So they it's kind of wild when you start scrolling down and they're recommending you games you haven't played yet. Like, hey, these games are on Game Pass, you should play them. And some of the ads are not unwelcome. They're ads for a service you are subscribed to. But as I had my Xbox on last night, I was installing a game, and as I was scrolling down, it was like, games recommended for you, and it was like, you should play Diablo 4, and also Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, and also Call of Duty Vanguard. And I'm like looking at it going like, why do you think that? Is it because I have played other Call of Duty games that you're recommending me a 2-year-old Call of Duty game here? Like, what? Why are we, what? It was a little weird. The other reason Nintendo will never fully allow what we think of as an app store that a tablet or a phone might have with that type of freewheeling freedom is security. There have been situations in the past where even the YouTube app they allowed on the 3DS could be used to hack the console. And so coming off of the Switch, which has been an eminently, extremely hackable device, to ask, are you going to put a tablet-style app store on it full of who the fuck knows what? The answer is no. Even if that was something they were thinking about, which I don't think they would ever even consider it in a real way, for security reasons, they would say, no, we are absolutely not going to let people down. There's not going to be some corner of this that runs Android and can just, run whatever. We're going to fucking, get me the good APKs. Let's fucking make it happen over here. No, it's just not, that is just not how it's going to go. For security reasons and for, child safety reasons and what have you, they would never lean into anything resembling a tablet app store type of thing. And I do not think they would put TikTok on there. Not that there's anything ratings wise about TikTok that is especially out of the ordinary. Not that TikTok is an extreme land of pornography per se. Stuff gets banned. Like, people post stuff that gets taken down, like any other service, like YouTube, which has been on Nintendo platforms in the past. But I do think that there is a specific stigma about TikTok that I think Nintendo would not want to engage with. They would not want to have to answer to anyone, parents, government entities, who, what have you, if suddenly they were like, oh yeah, and the new Switch can run TikTok. They would be like, ugh, all right, now we gotta go to talk to Congress about how we're not a Chinese company. Like, we're from Japan, right? And Congress is like, well, what's the difference? It's like some insane, some insane bullshit. You know how Congress be doing. So yeah, no, I don't think that we ever see anything like that. Ben in Boston writes in and says, Charles Martinet is retiring as Mario, but was his Mario voice actually good? In any other context, I think we'd probably roll our eyes at the broad Italian stereotype. The wahoo is fine and all, but it's a me and let's a go are kind of lame. Am I crazy? So, I think that, this, if Mario was invented today, if someone today came up with, I got this idea for this guy, we're going to call him Mario. He's like an Italian guy. He's a plumber, but I don't know, he used to be a carpenter. And we're just going to have him say like 4 things. And one of them is going to be, it's a me. I think that would be a thing you would look at and go like, ugh, what the fuck? Like, that would probably stand out a lot more. But because we have been dealing with these voices and this stuff for decades, we tend to not think about it. But I would say that like I think, yes, his Mario voice was good. I think he operated within the parameters he was given by Nintendo. I don't think that he necessarily is calling the shots of just like, that's all he's going to say. I can say these 4 things in a stereotypical Italian voice really well, but anything else, I just can't do it. I can give you a wahoo. I can give you a it's a me. I can give you a let's a go. I can give you a so long gay Bowser. That's all I can do. That's all I got for you. No. So yeah, I think that's it's vestigial or whatever, it is grandfathered in. But again, if this was something that was, people were coming up with right now, you'd be like, yeah, boy, ooh, that's maybe a little rough. But we still live in a world where Link doesn't speak. And I would put this as something kind of similar, a similar context of just like Link doesn't speak. Mario says these 6 things, and I don't necessarily think they need to change that, but also, I don't know. Could Link speak? Yes, of course. You just write the game around that. You write the rest of the game knowing that Link can talk, and it would be fine. People might be mad about it. Some people might be up in arms about it, but I don't think it would necessarily be automatically bad. But yeah, I don't know that it would necessarily make the game better in that specific case. I will say, on a go-forward basis, I prefer that characters speak. Rather than silent protagonists. I think silent protagonists that do not have a storyline reason why they aren't speaking, because that's an artistic choice and whatever. But I think if you're just going to like imply that like the character can speak and no one's ever going to call them out on like, you're the quiet type, huh? Well, actually that shit's almost worse. Then I think that I would much rather have characters speak. Yeah, Charles Martinet is going to actually go voice Link. He's got such hot lines as "It's a me, Link." That would be very funny if they said, "I'm retiring as Mario because I'm now the new voice of Link," and then he just rolls it out and it is just the Mario voice. So long, Ganon. But yeah, I don't know. I think, people in the chat are saying like Gordon Freeman should never speak. I actually think that Gordon Freeman must speak. Gordon Freeman has to speak. If they ever make another Half-Life game, the last level of the Half-Life game needs to be Gordon Freeman fucking like strapped to some horrific contraption, and then he opens his mouth and this fucking insane noise comes out and time stops and all the fucking vortigants and all the other fucking bullshit just fucking explodes, and it turns out Gordon Freeman had the power to fucking end it all, and save the world at any point. He just needed to emit the noise. He needed to be put under enough duress to where the tone comes out of him. And that's why they worship him. That's why they treat, that's why Gordon Freeman is special, is because they all know that he has the ability to fucking end the world with his mouth. But that, or they just like need to have a fucking like epilogue post-credit scene on Half-Life 3 where Gordon Freeman just walks in and makes a coffee and just goes like, ah, shit, are we out of creamer again? Like that, and that's it. Boom. just the dumbest meaningless fucking thing. Those are the two options. Choose whichever one you like, but it must be one of those two. Or do not make Half-Life 3. If you're going to make Half-Life 3, it must do one of those two things. It's it. An anonymous writer writes in and says, I work part-time at a Walmart store, and a couple of months back, my electronics team lead started to dismantle the PS4 kiosk. In the locked portion of the kiosk, there was one PlayStation 3 controller in great condition and two PS4 IDU discs. I made comment that I'd like the PS3 controller, and he slapped a price on it and threw in the two discs as well. What can I or should I do with these discs? They are the spring 2019 and summer 2019 refresh discs. So yeah, these IDU discs, these are the discs that get sent out specifically for those retail kiosks. And they will, those discs, I believe, will have like updated kiosk firmware and probably demos and, the demos that are on the kiosk and all of that stuff. I would go to redump.org and take a look at what they have there. You should try to dump those discs is what you should do. You should check and see if those discs have already been dumped, because I'm fairly sure that a lot of IDU discs have been dumped already. But you may have some that have been undumped. You may have some that need to be verified. PS3 discs are weird to dump. You will have to jump through some interesting hoops to make that happen if you so choose. But that's you should do that, or you should send them to someone who can dump them, and they're pretty good about, I'm not going to sit here and say definitely 100% of the time, but like I have heard of people sending discs to people to be dumped and then they get the discs back. It's not like people are just stealing shit. But yeah, I would try to dump the discs if you can. I believe you can do that with a modified PlayStation 3, or there might be, can you yank a Blu-ray drive out of the... You need keys. Like the Sony discs are encrypted in interesting ways. And so you will have to do something to get around that. Maybe we do one more. Actually, I took some of these already. So maybe we're slowly running out of... Let's see here. Yeah, we took that. Kevin writes in. Says, with Alan Wake 2 coming soon, it got me thinking about the first game when it came out back in 2010. I absolutely loved the atmosphere and lore in the game, and trying to figure out what was going on behind what was happening on screen was a side activity I enjoyed pursuing. After finishing the game, it was quite apparent that it was heavily inspired by Twin Peaks, a TV show I had never seen before. So, of course, I watched both seasons in a 2-night marathon. Jesus. And was floored by the quality of the show besides those episodes in season 2. Yeah. My question is, has a game ever inspired you to seek out a movie, TV show, or book? If so, what was it and what did you think? Super excited for Alan Wake 2. I've waited longer for this game than I had for Twin Peaks season 3. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, some people in chat are saying Deadly Premonition is what made me watch Twin Peaks. And yeah, I think that, yeah, whether it's Alan Wake or Deadly Premonition, some things just bring you to Twin Peaks. I have been wanting to rewatch Twin Peaks for a long time. But then I think about season 2 and I go like, ugh. I would not marathon through the full season in one night. That is a 2-night marathon to watch all of Twin Peaks is that's some dedication. That's kind of awesome. That sounds intense. Yeah, hockey. NHL 94, NHL 93 made me want to understand hockey. And so I started watching a little bit of hockey. I understood enough of the rules of hockey from the game. I learned how the blue lines work and so on, that I started trying to watch hockey. And I started buying hockey cards for a brief period of time. That lasted probably less than a year. And I just realized, like, hockey, I just don't like following the puck is hard. I want to say this is before they started trying to make the puck glow on the ice. I don't remember exactly when they did that, but that was much ridiculed as far as I can tell. But yeah, I don't know. Hockey is probably the best example. The KLF, actually, weirdly enough. So like I think I told this story, but I was playing this was early on in the pandemic. I was playing Streets of Rage 2. And I remembered an interview that Yuzo Koshiro had given that had recently been translated, I think. And I was reading it years after the fact. It was written back when, those games were relatively new. And he specifically said, like, oh yeah, like how did you come up with the music in this game? Like talking about like, hey, this like music is like weirdly contemporary. It's like, kind of, and him saying like, well, we were going out to clubs constantly back then, and we were making the music in the game, kind of a lot like the music in the clubs that we were, kind of, hearing at the time. And it was this kind of early 90s dance music, and it was stuff that was not super big in the US. It was catching on in some ways in the US, but it reminded me like, oh yeah, like and people have done the like comparison, of like, hey, these Streets of Rage songs kind of sound like these real songs, and it's not as blatant as some other video game music has been over the years, but it just kind of got me thinking about like that era of music again, and as such, that kind of got me because the KLF has always been like this weird, mysterious thing that I was never truly had penetrated, and never truly understood, because it was like, because you start looking for the albums online and you're like, what, why are there 9 different things called the White Room and they all have different track lists? What the fuck am I looking at? Like, like that stuff was a very good, interesting, weird mystery. And so that was a perfect late night pandemic mystery for me to suddenly get fucking insanely deep into. And it was because I had played Streets of Rage 2 and started thinking about that era of dance music and where it was at. Early rave scene, like, and the stuff that like pre-jungle, I guess, kind of early 90s, even in some cases, late 80s. A lot of the stuff that was coming out of the UK. And then some of the stuff that was becoming popular in the years after that. Yeah, CeCe Peniston, just like that is now the second time in 48 hours that she has come up in conversation, which is weird. But yes, the different types of house music that were starting to rise up. And then as that stuff was starting to break through later in the 90s with CNC Music Factory and whatever else, like, yeah, I kind of found my way into that stuff. And yeah, KLF's in the news. They just put a lot of their masters, and I guess the British Library, where some portion of it will be available for listening, which is kind of cool. And they are going to issue a DVD and Blu-ray of kind of the music videos that they did and the movie they made that never got an official release, but is very much on YouTube right now if you want to watch it. I don't know that I would recommend it. I don't know that I would say go in cold and go watch The White Room. Unless you watched Electroma, the Daft Punk movie, and really liked it, then I would say go watch this, because it's basically that. Even less happens in The White Room. Electroma has more going on in it. than the White Room does, but they're basically the same thing. Yeah, so I don't know. That's probably hockey in the KLF. Pretty natural pairing, I would say, on that front. And that's going to do it for emails. Thanks everybody for writing in. Again, podcast@guard.bike is the email address for you to get a hold of me with questions for me to take on the program. And thanks everyone that's been sending them in. Keep them coming. That's going to do it for the show this week. I am not sure. Sorry, this week is a little off kilter in a few different ways because, like I said, we have various appointments. My daughter just got back from the doctor this morning. My wife went to the dentist. I think there's another dentist appointment tomorrow, and so streaming schedule for the rest of the week, kind of playing it by ear a little bit. And I got to figure out if there's any, Starfield comes out on Friday, so I don't, it's like, do we stream Starfield or do we play more NES games? We'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'm undecided on that one, but yeah. So yes, we should be live tomorrow, Wednesday, sometime around 10 a.m. I'll post an update either on Twitch chat or in the news channel on the Discord. You can get on there. Go to patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann for more details on bonus shows and all that other stuff. We're coming up on, I am narrowing down what the next episode of the Jeff Gerstmann Hall of Fame is going to be. So that'll be coming over the next week or two here. And yes, we will move forward with video games and computer entertainment. Oh, I got to send an email. Speaking of that. Anyway, take care of yourselves. Be back next week at the podcast on Tuesday, when I'm sure we'll have plenty of Starfield stuff to talk about. Because it'll just be, well, that's another game that's in that weird early access, right? So we'll be plenty to talk about then. All right. Take care, everybody. I'll see you soon. Bye.